You don't like
weird.
leberwurst?
No, it's weird.
Oh, I love it. I love it with marmalade as well. But
That's okay.
leberkäse, I like this one.
I eat Klöben with Wurst, so.
And we start. Svenja, it's you.
Perfect. I think we can start. Perfect. Now I'll see myself as well. I just had connection issues with my Bluetooth headphones, but I think you all know that. But nevertheless, the struggles we face in everyday life, we certainly see now that the future is digital. So warm welcome on behalf of the European Liberal Forum to all the speakers that are joining us today, to all the participants that want to spend their Friday with us. And thank you very much for joining us for this very, very special flagship event of ELF, the Idea Accelerator. It's the third edition. The future is digital. And I'm very, very happy and glad that I have the honor to welcome you here in my capacity as the first vice president of ELF and as a member of the European Parliament of the Renew Europe Group working on digital topics. For those of you that might be joining ELF for the very first time, I hope you come back. But to give you a bit of input on ELF, ELF is the official political foundation of the European Liberal Party, the ALDE Party. And with around 47 member organizations, we work all over Europe to bring new ideas into the political debate, to spice things up, to provide a platform for discussion of networking, bringing people together, offering a platform of growth, and to empower citizens to make their voices heard. ELF brings together a very diverse network of national foundations, think tanks, and experts. And at the same time, we're very close to the ALDE Party and other liberal actors in Europe, just as the Renew Europe Group. But we're always our own independent organization. So in this way, we're able to offer a platform and a space for open and informed exchange and have views ranging from different actors. And today we want to look at a very special topic about digitization. And I'm very happy to see that on this very event, that what I just told you, that ELF is a platform of bringing people together, we see it here. We have it supported by a broad variety of actors in ELF, and we have topics on very interesting, we have discussion on very interesting topics. I'm actually very curious about the session, Robots on Trial. I'm very curious about that. Why? Because I'm working especially a lot on AI. And next week, we're actually going to see the first draft of the legislation coming from the European Commission on a horizontal regulation on artificial intelligence. So maybe we can already expect some spicy input for the expected regulation. In the second panel, there's going to be talk about e-democracy and citizens' participation. This is certainly something that is very interesting because we have very different aspects and approaches to this all over Europe. So I'm very curious to learn about the input here. And then there's something that's very close to my heart because I myself came from youth politics, powered by the European Liberal Youth, the discussion about youth political activism in the age of digital technologies. So what change can young people actually drive? Or is it just comfort liking something on Instagram? But is that really working for change? Let's see what the discussion will lead to. And then really interesting and a very, very current topic, regulating big tech. Is the European internet the best way forward? Are we going to fall for the trap of protectionism and falling behind? Or are we setting really good framework for future innovation and actually leading Europe on the way, on the leading front of innovation? So we're really going to have very, very interesting debates and discussions today. I'm very curious to hear that. I'm very happy that we have so many excellent speakers for all of these panels. And brilliant moderators as well. And I'm very, very much looking forward to that. I hope you are as well. I'm certain that not only the future will be truly digital, but our presence is to a large extent already. Unless you are from Germany as me, then we see that we're far behind. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very glad that you're with us. And I'll hand over to the Executive Director of the European Liberal Forum, Mr. Daniel Kadek.
Thank you so much, Svenja, for your warm words of welcome. Thank you very much, all of you joining us today from wherever you are. Indeed, we have a digital present, but we also have to talk about the digital future. So we are not, well, surprised again with a pandemic that we have to go digital all of a sudden again. And for our keynote today, we have a very special guest, Cornelia Kutterer, the Senior Director, Rule of Law and Responsibility Tech, European Government Affairs from Microsoft. She will talk to us a little bit about the basics, and especially the issue of rule of law and responsible tech are of crucial importance in these days, especially when we are talking about regulation, AI, robots on trial, how much conflict potential there is, but also how much opportunity. How do we square the circle? Some things we're going to talk about with Cornelia this morning. I will leave the floor to her, and then I will collect some questions from you, from the audience, via the Q&A function in Zoom, but also with questions on Facebook. And if you don't have questions, that gives me all the room to ask the stupid questions that I can come up with, because there is a lot to talk about and a lot of things that we would like to know. So without any further ado, Cornelia Kutterer from Microsoft, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and thanks for having me today. I think it's an incredibly important time to talk about those issues, and I'm humbled and honored to be with you, also due to my own relations to the liberals in Germany in particular, but also in Brussels more generally. So let me start with saying the obvious. COVID-19 has been an incredible brought with us both challenges and opportunities. The level of social disruption and personal trial are really historic, driven by the pandemic, and we are only at the beginning of the economic and social ramifications. And really, in addition, we see these tensions around broader megatrends, globalization, geopolitical shifts, climate change, all of these transcending into an accelerated digital transformation. The EU really deserves credit for embracing the moment, doubling down on its ambition and aspirations, even in times of crisis. This twin green and digital transition really hits the mark here. Tech has obviously played an important role in the pandemic. On the positive side, it fostered the digitization, enabled in a huge speed connecting people, helped find the pandemic through research, but also with enabling first responders, empowering businesses to continue their operations, and allowing employees to retain their jobs by working from home. On the flip side, of course, what we have seen is an increased tech dependency and a realization of the tech dependency. And as tech becomes increasingly interwoven into our lives, companies like Microsoft have a greater responsibility than ever before, really contributing to the post-COVID recovery, the future, addressing concerns around tech, its responsibility, and our role in our industry and society at large. And there's no doubt that in particular, Microsoft really believes that technology has to run on trust. When it comes to the economic recovery, we acknowledge the positive transformative effects that the crisis has had in a way we operate today, but also in the way we will do so in the future. There is huge potential opportunity in really reflecting about this. So it's obvious that we cannot really return to the way of doing business as we did before the crisis. The rapid and widespread embrace of digital ways of working has helped us through the immediate crisis, but we now need smart public policies to make the benefits of these innovations permanent. As Europe looks to rebuild and move forward, there's a chance to address cracks in the system and make a fair, inclusive, and sustainable recovery a priority for all of us. So Europe, of course, is at the epicenter for the sustainability agenda, including in green recovery plans for COVID-19. Microsoft has made public its sustainability commitments, which are very much aligned with the EU goals. Our work with the private sector partners and the EU institutions is to ensure the success of the Green Deal. We have in particular responsibilities, so we believe, with our customers in the various sectors so that they are enabled to achieve their sustainability goals. Our own announcement has been a big splash. We have announced that we want to go carbon negative by 2030 and removing all carbon we emitted since founding by 2050. Currently, we have already reduced carbon emissions over 500,000 tons this past year, and we increased the use of renewable energy. We also work with our customers. For example, we have a pioneering co-innovation project with Repsol to implement smart energy initiatives. But we also need to think about bridging the digital divide. Here, I would in particular think about broadband connectivity, but more importantly about education and skills. We've welcomed the European Skills Agenda, and we have also joined the Youth Employment Support and the Pact for Skills. Our company have obviously a huge role to play here too. In 2020, we launched a global skills initiative to reach 25 million worldwide. 9 months later, we've helped about more than 30 million people. And in March 2021, just last month, we extended our vision and commitment with a Microsoft LinkedIn partnership to help 250,000 companies make a skill-based hire in 2021. There's also important conversations that we need to have, in particular digital sovereignty. In this context of tech dependency, the EU's digital sovereignty aspirations are grounded in valid concerns. Who doesn't want to be digitally sovereign? So the question is not if, but how. How can Europe strike the balance between reaping the benefits of the digital transition and addressing the challenges of the digital transformation? The EU's openness is in the world and towards the world is part of its strength, and it has to make sure that digital sovereignty becomes not too dominated by building walls, screening itself from the outside world. The EU would otherwise risk losing its global soft powers as a rule setter, becoming more of a rule taker. Europe has really an opportunity to lead the way. The historic experience in building institutions that are fit for challenges is very unique to Europe. Defining a shared approach to sovereignty evolved after and since the World War II is exactly what the European project is about. And it is only natural that the world looks towards Europe for answers. Who else would be better suited to make sovereignty fit for the digital age? So those discussions around digital sovereignty and its implication should definitely not undermine the Brussels effect or make it negative effect, and should find the right balance between protection and openness. In this context, technology neutrality is very important, and more so in seizing all the full value of data. As the Commission, member states and industry co-invest in common data spaces, they will want to leverage best-in-breed platforms and other technologies, including from global hyperscale providers, provided those companies, of course, are prepared to respect European rules and values. Microsoft is a strong supporter of increased data sharing and has initiated in April 2020 an open data campaign to advocate for greater openness, sharing, and collaboration around data. And we are in particular looking forward in seeing how the Data Governance Act and in specifically and also in certain sectors such as health evolve in the legislative process. An important question, of course, in this context is data transfers outside of Europe, and the need for relevant safeguards again has been raised in Schrems too. And we obviously know that policymakers, the European Commission here in Brussels, but also the White House and the Department of Commerce and the Department of Justice are looking at these and are very focused on resolving these issues. But of course, there is an increasing recognition that European regulators should not create more uncertainty by adding new rules on data localization. We've seen also that there's currently, I think, an increased realization that there are, even within the European Union, value tensions that require us to really think through in how to reach solutions in Europe to even also apply those rules externally. And I'm thinking here in particular of the recent decisions of the European Court of Justice that followed the Schrems II decisions, in particular those on data retention and increasing call out from member states that they do require certain measures in order to support their law enforcement. So this is a very topical debate that is in front of our eyes, evolving very, very quickly. And I think there is a lot of reasoning that needs to be done in order to solve this properly. Of course, we cannot have open, innovative, competitive digital markets if we are unable to solve this. So this is a real plea for policymakers to come together and really walk through these value tensions as they occur in those recent Court of Justice judgments and in relation to many of the ongoing legislative files related to privacy and law enforcement. And then, of course, as Svenja already mentioned, there is AI and AI regulation. AI and other emerging techs are, of course, twin-edged swords. How AI is changing our societies in years to come shouldn't be underestimated, as it can contribute in both positive and negative ways. Huge opportunities to create new jobs for growth, sustainability, addressing social challenges, social problems in much better ways than we have ever been able to do so before. And then there are challenges in relation to human rights and really democracy at large. Of course, we all saw the leaked version of the AI regulation, and it's too early for us to make comments on it. We'll wait for that for next week on the 21st. But we are very much looking forward to engaging with policymakers in Europe to ensure, to align and ensure that Legal Forward is both innovation friendly, resilient to disruption, and really enables the fundamental rights of the European Union and rule of law to be implemented in the context of how AI is involved in our daily, every technologies we are interacting with. In this context, I'd like to say that over the last couple of years, Microsoft has really done an enormous amount of internal work that has been aimed at operationalizing internally our commitment to large principles that are fairly aligned to those that the high-level group on AI has developed. And I'd be happy to talk a little bit more around those, the work that we have been doing. As I look at the leaked draft of the European Commission, there are a number of the requirements, the risk management and the AI governance that seem to be quite aligned with what we are currently doing. And so we have really some first experience now in how that actually works. And I think that's hopefully an important contribution to the conversation. As we said in our response to the AI white paper, we agree that an ecosystem of excellence around AI will require coordinated investment and research and innovation. And as I mentioned before, with our skills announcements, these are things that we hope to be actively contributing to the European Commission's endeavors. The EU is really uniquely suited to the task of leading the world in AI research and innovation. Europe's diversity of cultures, traditions, and perspectives will serve as tremendous assets in building and maintaining cutting-edge research and innovation communities. And they really also are a wonderful example in how inclusiveness will be an asset in making AI less biased, more inclusive, with a framework around transparency and accountability that really tries to make AI human-centric. I think Europe is really at the start in making sure that we have another Brussels effect in the context of AI regulation. There's no doubt that companies like Microsoft that lead in AI innovation have all eyes on the forthcoming discussions, and we're very much looking forward to engaging in this. Now, this is really because it will help guide the way and path the way for ensuring that we have a robust environment that protects fundamental rights and democratic institutions. And this is really essential in times where we see democracies declining around the globe. The opportunities here in many ways is that technology has empowered citizens with more information and enabled governments to improve transparency and accountability. And then, of course, we see the challenges, the fake news, the biased systems, the growing assault on privacy, and gradually contributing to the erosion of democratic spaces. To counter these threats, we all have to work together, and countries need to look to the opportunities of technology and identify policy tools that can help protect against the complex challenges. We ourselves, as stated at the very beginning, believe that we have a role to play. And of course, as a tech company, we look at our tech opportunity in order to do so. We have started 2 years ago the Defending Democracy program that works also with stakeholders, including governments, NGOs, academics, and industry in all democratic countries globally to protect campaigns from being hacked, increase political advertising transparency online, and explore technology solutions to serve and protect electoral processes, as well as defending against disinformation campaigns. Microsoft, as such, is also a signatory of the Code of Practice on Disinformation, and we are very much also engaged in this space, always in the context of ongoing deliberations in the context of the Digital Market Act and the Digital Services Act as well. So to sum up, Europe really must continue to lead in defining the guardrails for tech and holding companies accountable to work in the public interest. And the tech industry has to adapt to Europe, not the other way around. An approach and a responsibility we gladly take upon our shoulders. Our ambitions as Microsoft is a shared one with Europe, making Europe fit for the digital age by making technology fit for Europe first. And with this, I hand over back to Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cornelia, for this very broad introductory speech, keynote. I could unpack so many things that you touched upon. We are a little bit pressed by time, so I just would like to raise one quick question, and that goes in the direction that you mentioned in the beginning. We also came back to, and that's the increased tech dependency that you were talking about. And it has not only become clear how dependent we are in the last month, but also how far we've come. If I remind myself of the first iPhone I had in 2007, and now I do everything digitally, and I'm very angry if I have bad cellular connection and my 4G is not as fast downloading as I would like it to be. But we have seen this incremental change on steroids over the last years. So we don't realize how fast things are going. So reacting doesn't seem fast enough. So how do we create this smart policies? How do we create this framework that enables innovation? But also, how do we ensure that we have policies that are up to speed with innovation? Because it seems to be the other way around. It seems that we are running after everything. We still don't know how to deal with Uber in a lot of countries. And now we have to talk about AI. And the beauty of the market is completely unpredictable. So how do we create a framework that's technology neutral, but at the same time, we keep our digital sovereignty when it comes to our own data, when it comes to the discussion, but also when it comes to human rights? Maybe a 3-minute answer to this very long question.
That's a very large question.
Or we meet again and do that in a longer session.
We can also do this in a longer session, but let me eventually say a couple of words. It's incredibly hard to make smart policies when even the data scientists, engineers, and visionaries will be unable to say how AI will evolve. And so we have this, we will probably have to come to grips with the fact that, AI will bring opportunities, disruptions, and surprises. And so one first thing is very likely to say we have to see policy as a path and not as an end goal, because there is no end to it. And finding smart mechanisms that we don't have legislations that we then 10 years later realize they are totally out of phase with what we are doing now. So we need to find ways to make it the path is the journey, is the goal, not there is no end to this. I think that's one of the key issues. The second part, I think, is we have to realize we're sitting in the same boat. And that's the other thing. It's not that there is the regulator, the policymaker that has to control or tame. I think we need to realize that we're sitting in the same boat with the same objectives. We want to make this a human-centric environment based on rule of law and based on democratic systems. And this defending democracy is really, for me, it's really at the heart of all of that. We've seen how problematic it can be, and we are all like, let's have the democracies of this world really working together on this with the companies that are supportive of democracies. And in reality, what it is companies, tech companies in particular, they thrive in democracies much better than anywhere else. So there is a joint interest here, and that would be like the 3 points that I would make at the very highest level. But I'm happy to have an additional conversation at another stage.
Perfect. And I think you also had already the best word to close that with your 3 points. And I really like what you said. This is not a goal in itself, but it's a means, and we have to see how we make it work. And how to make it work is something that we will be discussing along the way with new tools for citizen-driven e-democracy, robots on trial, the next session, but also the other sessions that we will have today. So let me thank you very much once more again, Cornelia, for joining us this morning. And I would like to hand over to the future. I would like to hand over to the future, where we have a mock trial discussion hosted by the European Liberal Forum, moderated by the great Beatrice Rios, the EU affairs reporter, who we have been working so closely with in the past, to talk about what happens with robots and what happens with robots go astray. Who do we judge? How do we judge? And how the discussion is, you can judge that later. So Beatrice, I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Cornelia, again for joining us. Thank you very much all for you for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and welcome everyone to this session, Robots on Trial. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to do today, you know that any development in technology leads to questions of legal aspects, of ethical nature, and today we wonder, would ever be a robot be brought to court because of war crimes, or because it would be sued because of discrimination? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have two different scenarios, and we're going to have our experts discussing those two scenarios, and you will be the judge. So make sure that you follow very closely the discussion today. We're live on Facebook, and after the trial, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any question you would like to address to our speakers today, make sure that you type it in our Q&A box. Without further ado, I would like to jump straight away into the conversation, and I'm going to present to you our first team to discuss this first scenario. I would like to introduce in the prosecutor team, Elizabeth Hovenfair-Piben, who is a PhD researcher in Stanford. And in the defense team, I would like to welcome Francesco Capelletti, who is a research fellow at the European Liberal Forum. Now, what we are going to do is I'm going to present to you the scenario, and you are going to have to vote. You're going to have to tell me whether you think artificial intelligence in this case is guilty or innocent. So here's the scenario. On March 24th, 2026, military commander Stevenson from the state of Arcadia gives the order to an unarmed, unmanned aerial vehicle, so UAV model M12XF4, to target a high-ranking member of the Anchor Group as part of a non-international armed conflict in which the state of Arcadia is engaged. The UAV has a technical capability to detect the target with its radar. However, the AI is not advanced enough to reliably identify the difference between the target and a civilian who has a very similar build profile as a target and happens to be in the same area as the target. The IA control UAV selects the target without requiring prior confirmation from the human operator and terminates its selected target. In this case, the AI control UAV selected the wrong individual and wrongfully killed an innocent civilian. So the questions that we're going to launch to our speakers is, who is it for this loss of a human life? Was it the EI or the person, the government, who delegated the final decision to kill on solely the UAV? Even if the right to kill or not is fully entrusted to AI on the battlefield, who is morally responsible for that victim? The AI, the person who created the code, the military who sent the AI into fighting, and are we ready to fully entrust the choice of a human life on or death on the battlefield to AI alone? So I'm going to ask you now to go into the pool and answer this question. Is AI, in this particular case that I just presented to you, guilty or innocent? And we're gonna see what you have to say. You're voting now. I see that most of you believe it's innocent. You can keep on voting. I'm waiting for your answers before jumping into the discussion. I think most of you are voting for this innocent. So actually the responsibility of this killing would be on the hands of those who gave the order. So we're going to move now, and we are going to see what our speakers have to say. Now, for you to understand how this is going to work, I'm going to give 3 minutes to every one of the speakers, and in 3 minutes they have to make their case. And just for the speakers to know, when you are going to be on 30 seconds, I'm going to show this so that you can know that you're running out of time. So first, I would like to give the floor to Elizabeth, and I'm going to start the 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's get started. Before taking up the role as public prosecutor in this mock trial, I would like to emphasize that the views expressed in the following section solely represent the role I was assigned for the purpose of this trial. Good morning, my name is Dr. Elizabeth Hofberger-Pippan, and it is my sincerest pleasure to represent the state of Arcadia as public prosecutor on this case. On 24th March 2026, the defendant, an unmanned aerial vehicle M12 XF4, solely operating on the basis of AI, attacked a civilian, thereby violating international humanitarian and international criminal law. The state of Arcadia, to be precise, the military commander Stevenson decided to engage a legitimate military target, a high-ranking member of the Anchor Group, a non-state armed group, by deploying the unmanned aerial vehicle. Because the unmanned aerial vehicle was solely using radar, it was incapable of distinguishing between legitimate military targets, such as fighters of the Anchor Group, and civilians. Ultimately, however, it was the unmanned aerial vehicle and the artificial intelligence it was operating on which decided to carry out the attack without requiring prior confirmation from the human operator. And this, dear jury, is why the unmanned aerial vehicle itself is to be held criminally liable. Members of the jury, let me clarify why the unmanned aerial vehicle has violated international criminal law and why it should be held accountable for it. While the human operator and the designers of the weapon system have set preconditions for the unmanned aerial vehicle and have restrained and predefined its operational range, the ultimate decision whether to engage the target or abort mission ultimately rests upon the unmanned aerial vehicle. There are no signs and no indications that Arcadia or the military commander himself were involved in a military operation, apart from the decision to execute the mission in more general terms. The judgment whether to engage the specific target, which turned out to be a civilian, was undertaken solely by the unmanned aerial vehicle. It was capable of forming human-like judgment whether or not to carry out an attack. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is of utmost importance in our case at hand. The unmanned aerial vehicle was capable of understanding whether the information it could gather by using sensors and other technical arrangements based on artificial intelligence was sufficient to distinguish clearly between a civilian and a legitimate military target. Thus, the UAV has acted recklessly, which is, according to recent case law provided by the International Criminal Court, one of the subjective elements to hold someone accountable for violating the law. Ladies and gentlemen, the last question we have to ask ourselves is how we should proceed with the unmanned aerial vehicle. Putting it in prison would have no greater bearing for society. Thus, I ask to destroy the unmanned aerial vehicle completely. Dear jury, I ask you to find the defendant guilty as charged on all counts and to demand its complete destruction and its permanent elimination from the battlefield. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Elisabeth. Now it's time for Francesco to reply to the arguments. Please, Francesco, you have the floor. The minute you unmute yourself, I click the button.
Morning. Dear member of the jury, can we accuse a pen of writing bad words? I mean, we are talking about taking into consideration artificial intelligence in the context of human rights during a military operation. But human and individual rights are the core of the interest of people operating in the battlefield. However, we should also consider a real warfare, a real scenario, a real warfare situation. And there are many points to take into consideration in this respect. First of all, the self-draining drone with artificial intelligence technology we're talking about today belong to the defense apparatus. It has been financed according to project related to a program to develop new technologies for military application. And the owner of this UAV is ultimately the state. The purpose for the creation of such a technology was to defend citizens. Secondly, the new technologies has imposed herself on the ground at an operational level. It means that there will be inevitably a consequent employment of these technologies over the military market. What does it mean? I say inevitable, and this is an adjective that may worry, but it helps to understand that a new arms race has begun with the introduction of artificial intelligence. And who can assure our citizens that someone is not building an automatic AI-driven weapon more powerful than the one we are discussing today? Third, if we wanted to discuss the problem of calculating the risk in military conflicts, we would have to consider a much broader scenario than just this specific case. It seems that today we don't want to come to a trial on the substance of the matter, but rather to trial the technology itself. And let me say that talking about dangerousness of technology by itself has no meaning. We firmly believe that technology is neutral, and it's only the use that is made that determines its impact. Moreover, in addition, implementing artificial intelligence could reduce the risk, the risk and the impact of any warfare operation on the civilian population, because it could be calculated in detail in advance, then bringing to a better decision. Finally, this jury should consider that the entire chain of command was involved in the decision. The order to launch this drone was given from the central military system. Such a system is managed following the logic of necessity dictated by different grades of intelligence information and the urgency on the battlefield. Thus, there is no responsibility for the act.
You run out of time. Thank you so much for your argument. Those were the two opening statements from our speakers. Think about what they are saying, because you're going to be able to vote again and tell us if you have changed your mind. But before that, I'm going to give back the floor to Elisabeth for 2 minutes to reply to Francesco's argument. So here you have the floor again, Elisabeth. Go on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Again, my name is Elisabeth Hoffberger-Pippern, and I'm the prosecutor in this case. In my opening statement, I argued that it was artificial intelligence alone which made the decision to engage the target, which turned out to be a civilian. The defense argued that the ownership is a decisive factor in holding the state itself liable for having violated the law. But actually, the state merely acquired the unmanned aerial vehicle, and the military commander Stevenson decided to deploy it in a specific military operation. As already outlined in my opening statement, the ultimate decision to carry out the attack was undertaken by the unmanned aerial vehicle itself, operating solely based on artificial intelligence. Dear jury, in your decision that is about to be made in the aftermath, please consider that artificial intelligence was and is still able to make human-like judgments. As the defense argued, the entire chain of command has to be taken into account when seeking accountability for violations of humanitarian law and criminal law. But this seems hardly convincing in the case of artificial intelligence. Each decision that is made beforehand merely plays a small role in the execution of the attack, and neither designers, developers, nor the state or the military commander himself were actually able of understanding and predicting the effects that were caused by the unmanned aerial vehicle based on artificial intelligence. This is what we call the so-called black box phenomenon of artificial intelligence. Dear jury, I would ask you to find the defendant guilty, to remove it from the battlefield completely, and or to destroy it as a punitive measure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We have the prosecution sticking to her points, and now we're going to see what's the reaction from Francesco to this final statement before we hear from the judge, who is you participant. So make sure that you have an answer for this. 2 minutes for you again, Francesco. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will be rather brief this time. We don't see that there is a responsibility for the object with which the action was carried out, because the action must be included in the wider context of the military operation carried out in that area at that precise time. This drone didn't start from the base automatically. It was launched in this area. Therefore, the destruction of an object with which the offensive action was directly or indirectly perpetrated does not represent a solution of what must be a fair trial. Let me again stress what I said at the very beginning. When a pen writes some bad words, you won't accuse the pen, but the writer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesco. That was brief indeed. And now I go back to you, the judges. What do you think, after all that you have here from Elizabeth and Francesco, what do you think? It's AI guilty or innocent in this particular case? I want you to vote again. Go to the poll and let me know what do you think. Before, we had 90% of the voters thought it was innocent and 10% vote for guilty. Let's see if there's any changes. I see a little bit of changing here, a lot of votes. You still have the time. Let me know what you think. Was Elizabeth able to change your mind and move you into the yes, indeed, it's the artificial intelligence who is guilty and not whoever gave the order? Some of you did change. We have 88% of the voters saying indeed artificial intelligence was guilty, but innocent, and it changed a little. So 89%, 84. It's changing. You keep on voting. Let's see how we get to. Okay, now it's a little bit more stable. You did change a lot of minds, Elizabeth. Congratulations on that. Still, Francesco won. We have 84% of the voters saying that the artificial intelligence was innocent, and it was whoever made the choice who was guilty by 16%. Thank you so much for this debate. We will get back to you. Stay with us. If you have questions from Francesco and Elizabeth, make sure that you stay with us and you ask them on the Q&A box. We will have a discussion with them after about this scenario and also artificial intelligence in general. Thank you so much again, Elizabeth and Francesco, and talk to you soon. Now we're going to move into the second scenario. This one is about artificial intelligence discrimination on the basis of the person profile. And in this case, we're going to have on the prosecution team, Sarah Chandler, who is a senior policy advisor at the European Digital Rights. And on the defense team, we're going to have Basanta Ipi Tapa, who is Research and Competence Center Public IT. We're going to follow the exact same logic that we did before. So I am going to tell you what the scenario is. You're going to be able to vote again in our pool whether you think artificial intelligence is innocent or guilty. And then we're going to have the conversation between Sara and Basanta. So first of all, this is the scenario we're talking about. In late 2025, a new insurance company called eInsurance O decided to use AI to determine the risk score for its future customers. It purchases the software from a third party, AI Software Everywhere, and it inputs all its existing data while also instructing the AI to use the social media profiles of its future customers in its analysis. Mr. Kavame, who is a customer from an ethnic minority, wishes to transfer his account to this news insurance company, eInsurance O, and is assessed by the newly installed AI system and receives a worse risk score than he had at his current insurance company, Trust Insurance, while all the other customers remain the same. So Mr. Kavame is refused by the new insurance company based on the results of an AI assessment. here we go again. So who is to blame for this racist discriminatory behavior? The AI, the company that used the AI, the person and company who created the code in the first place? Who is at fault? It's the same question here. What do you think? Is AI guilty of this case of discrimination, or is the person who made the choice, or is the person who decided to use this software, or is the person who created this software? So we want to hear from you. Go to the poll and vote. I'm waiting for your answers. We see, again, here we see that most of the people are voting for the AI to be innocent, but it's varying a little bit here. We see, oh, we're finding more or less the same percentage. It seems that most of our participants believe that AI is definitely innocent of all charges. Here we have the same percentage. We have 90 to 10. We're gonna see what happens next. And as I did before, I'm gonna give 3 minutes to Sarah to start her arguments now.
Thank you very much. I'm Sarah Chanda, and I'm here today on behalf of the prosecution. So I'm here to argue that AI is guilty of discrimination. As we know that discrimination is a structural phenomenon, I will do so by arguing that AI is not just guilty in this case, but in all cases where it is used by those with power against those with little power. So AI is a system, it's a structure, or it's an ideology. And as all of these things, it was developed actually in the context of the US military industrial complex. We need to remember this. The very idea of AI was designed to serve military power, violence, and maintain global dominance. In the words of AI expert Yarden Katz from Harvard Medical School, AI has been a tool in the arsenal of institutions predicated on white supremacy. Now, I say all of this because often in discussions about AI, the concept is presented as neutral, therefore it can't be discriminatory. We are told to believe that AI is about complicated phenomena, data processing, and algorithms that we will never truly understand as humans. In debates like this, in a seemingly innocuous case as a simple statistical model, such as a risk score to determine the insurance access of the customer, we are supposed to accept that AI is somehow entirely a new phenomena, which mostly brings benefits and progress to everybody. But all we need to do is fix tiny blips of discrimination, like this very case today. However, in this case, we see that the AI is guilty for discrimination because we cannot divorce AI from the developer of the software or the company that has decided to use it. Why? Because AI is not a new entity. It forms part of the infrastructure and the system used by the insurance company to assess risk in order to increase its profits. The ethnic minority customer is merely caught in the crossfire. In arguing AI is guilty, I want to take us away from the myth that technology is neutral. I think this myth is distracting, it's mystifying, and it's disempowering, and it is about distracting us with a technical conversation of how algorithms work. Instead, AI is a governing system, and it increases the power imbalance between those who develop and deploy those technologies and those who are subject to them. What does that mean in practice? It means AI is deployed in more and more areas: finance, migration control, policing, social welfare, and we will see an increase in discrimination from the AI when we do that, but also an increase in the power for the private companies that develop those systems. AI is deployed to serve the interests of those who develop it, increasing the profits for the sale of these systems, but also...
Sarah, you've reached to your 3 minutes. Thank you so much for those arguments, especially this very pointy, the technology is not neutral. Let's see what Basanta has to say about that from the defense. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for your plea. I'm here to argue that this AI is, of course, innocent. And just imagine, if you at home on your computer, you now download some population statistics and use your Excel program to turn those into bar charts, and it then shows differences between population groups, for example, higher poverty rates for ethnic minorities. Are those poverty rates then the fault of your Excel program? An AI is simply a set of statistical calculations, some kind of hypercharged Excel. It takes the data it is given and then calculates probabilities based towards a given objective. For example, how likely is someone to have an accident, to develop chronic disease, or to default on insurance rates, to stay in this case. So don't shoot the messenger here. The AI extrapolates based on existing data, which represents our social realities. If those exhibit discrimination, this means our society is racist, not the AI's calculations. So the AI is not only innocent, it cannot even be held liable. Rather, I would argue that the insurance company is to blame here. As the insurance company knows which kinds of discriminations are actually forbidden by law, it is their responsibility to actively look for and to counteract the influence of racism in the data. There are automated solutions to check for such things. You can use cleaned training data sets, or you can calibrate your algorithm parameters accordingly. Insurance companies know how to do this. Their mathematicians have been doing such things for decades, if not centuries, just a bit slower than AI. So the insurance company might even delegate this task to the AI developers. This is then a point of argument between the insurance company and the AI developer whose responsibility this was. But in the end, it is the insurance company that has to make sure that their decisions toward their customers are compliant with law, no matter if they use AI or human staff. So to sum it up, 1, the AI merely reveals the racist realities of our society. And 2, it is the insurance company's job to keep racist biases out of their risk assessment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Basanta. I would like to hear what Sarah has to say about this opening statement, but first I would like to recall you that you have to decide whether you change your mind based on the arguments that we are seeing from our speakers, and that you can ask them questions. After these 2 closing remarks, we're gonna go back to the Q&A session, so make sure that you have questions for them. I have a lot after all these presentations, so let's go back to Sarah and see what she has to say about this. The artificial intelligence discrimination is actually based on a discriminatory society. You have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you. In my opening statement, I made the claim that AI is about power. So, unlike as the defense has argued, we cannot view AI in a simply technological way. We cannot say it's just the algorithm, the Excel sheet, and disempower and disenfranchise people that are subject to that by saying it is only about technology. We cannot divorce the power manifested in an AI system with the companies that develop them and the institutions that deploy them. Therefore, when we say AI is guilty of discrimination, we are saying it is the power manifested in the system as developed by the engineers that have coded the racist bias, but also of the technology companies that deploy them, the insurance companies that deploy them, and the governments that deploy them. By arguing that AI is guilty of discrimination, we have to avoid framing the conversation only in technological ways, but also looking at the power. AI as a concept, including all of those in power, has worsened discrimination and disadvantage, making it harder for us to catch, harder for us to understand. It slipped under the radar and hide behind this objective technological idea. Using this argument, I argue that AI is guilty, not because technological systems have thoughts, feelings, or intentions and therefore legal responsibility, but because AI is a manifestation of the power of those that deploy, develop, profit, and exploit us using these systems. That guilt is a shared one, but it is a guilt all the same.
Strong words from the prosecution. I'm going to hear back from Basanta about this closing argument from Sarah. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, so let me stress, AI is a tool. And as a tool, it is, of course, serves whoever holds it in its hands. So the question is, do you actually, if a suppressive system uses Excel, do you then demand Excel to be outlawed to fight the suppression? So I think what the prosecutor is arguing is it's the right cause. We want to keep discrimination out of our insurances, but if we now blame the AI, we're merely shooting at tools, at symptoms, but rather we have to fight the root causes. And don't be distracted by fancy tools like AI. This means we have to put strong regulations in place that prohibit discrimination, whether it is then actually realized by AI, by an Excel sheet, or by a human mathematician sitting at his desk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Basanta. Now I want to hear again back from the jury. What do you think in this particular case of discrimination? Is artificial intelligence responsible for it? Is it guilty or is it innocent, and whoever is behind is responsible for that? I want you to vote. Let's go back to the pool and see what you have to say. Let me know, do you agree with Sarah that it's just like it's the technology which is responsible for this discrimination, or with Basanta that it's actually whoever is behind and the fact that the society is really discriminatory? I see that here you've managed to change more views in this case, Sarah. Yeah, you've actually convinced a lot of people compared with the first scenario. We have so far 80% of the jury thinks, oh, it's changing. Let's wait a little bit and see how this goes. Before we close and move to the Q&A session, I want to recall you as well that you can ask questions to our speakers. I see a lot of change here. Indeed, Sarah, you've managed to convince a lot of people. So 70% of our participants of the jury thinks that artificial intelligence is indeed innocent, and 24% thinks it's guilty. Thank you so much again, Basanta and Sarah, for your very insightful thoughts about this particular case. I would like to recall that all the views that you have here today are not representatives of what our speakers think about artificial intelligence. This is just a role game, and this is what we've done today. I'm going to go to the Q&A session and see if we have some questions, and I'm going to ask our speakers to go all back with us, Elizabeth, Francesco, Basanta, and Sarah, to be here with us so we can have this Q&A session. I'm going to see if I'm able to read, because it's a little bit difficult for me now. Okay, let's go. Are you ready? We can start already with the Q&A session. We have a lot of questions. So the first one is, how can AI ever be guilty? It's always a human factor, having programmed AI also to learn and take decisions. Abstract technical items can, in my eyes, never be held accountable. In our legal understanding, it should always be the human factor being accountable for any outcome. This is coming from Henning Schumacher. Who would like to address this question? Is always the human behind responsible for the AI consequences, whatever it's killing a human innocent, or is discriminatory practices in an insurance company? Maybe, Elizabeth, you would like to take the floor first?
Thank you very much. Well, I totally agree with this question or with this assessment. I was just taking up the role as a public prosecutor, speaking for the liability of artificial intelligence, but in fact, I also agree that it's always the humans which who decide whether or not artificial intelligence should be deployed either on the battlefield or in civilian areas. That said, I totally agree with this assumption, and this is actually also the opinion of the states parties, because in Geneva, because currently they are not really negotiating, but they are looking for a normative and regulatory framework of lethal autonomous weapon systems. And this is the narrative that is also taking place there, that it is the humans that are responsible for deploying lethal autonomous weapon systems, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. And well, let's see how the review conference this fall will end up. But the guiding principles of 2019 also emphasize that it is always the humans who are responsible and who have to be held accountable in the case of use of AI on the battlefield.
Indeed. I would like to maybe hear from Sarah as well, because it was also the prosecution in this case. Do you agree with this assessment that is actually whoever is behind this technology who should be held responsible for these consequences?
Definitely, but I would like to add a little bit of a complication, I think, which is that often we make this very binary and simplistic distinction between humans and systems, or humans and AI, or humans and robots, actually is a lot more complicated than that. And what I tried to argue, which was a very complicated argument in my speech, is that actually power is not just about people versus robots. It's also about the people that hold power. And we exist in a world now where technology companies, but also states who use complex AI systems, have immense power as institutions, as power holders. So when we talk about this binary between who is responsible, we also need to include in that analysis the immense power of developers of AI, selling AI, but also the companies that use them, and also the governments that use them, not just as humans, but as institutions, as power holders. And I think sometimes the debate around AI has obscured that by focusing too much on the technology.
I think it's a very good point in there, that it's not so much about persons, it's also about institutions and power, which makes a huge difference. It's not the same that AI is being used by a single individual than when it's being used by a military operation like we have seen today. And there is a little bit of to this question, and I would like to address it maybe to Vasanta, because it goes a little bit with his argument. So AI is a written code. We need to understand why in this case the code produced discriminatory outcomes. Was it by accident, reinforcing the real world discrimination upon which it was written, or was it purposely designed to proxy for race? What do you think, Vasanta? You were talking a little bit about this question of, to some extent, the AI, it was just a reflection of the existing data, which are based in a discriminatory society.
I'm very much with Sarah on this one. I think what we have to be careful with is, to not let technological systems obfuscate our clear vision of who's responsible for things. It's very easy to basically say, well, this is computer says no, and then basically you've somehow delegated the responsibility to the system, but to be very clear that it's always the institution who's running or who's responsible for regulating the technological system that is to blame, and as it is to blame, who's then also responsible for actually monitoring outcomes, looking actively for issues. And this is hard with if you have black box systems. That's not an easy task, but it's something that you have to take on, and we should really hold people accountable to this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I have another question that I would like to address to Francesco. Does assigning liability to AI absolves liability to its operator or the respective commander? What do you think about that? You were talking about these, you cannot blame. Do you want me to repeat the question? It's okay? Because you mentioned, you were making this argument of you cannot blame the pen for whatever wrong words are written. So how do you feel about this assigning liability question?
Yeah, thank you. When it comes to military field to defense, it's quite a bit more complicated, I guess. When we are talking about civil society, what should concern us, and sorry for this divagation, but should concern us is data. I heard sometimes that data is the oil of the future. And that means that in the case of AI, we are talking about gathering an enormous quantity of data in order to train the artificial intelligence system, because it's not intelligent otherwise. And when it comes to security, it's a bit complicated because there is indeed a lack of regulation at this time with respect to the artificial intelligence. But I see some alignment with the UAV, the maneuvered vehicles, the drones, basically. The operation carried out by a command in this respect, when the object is maneuvered from someone from remote control. And I was said in the defense statement that accidents may happen and are happening in conflict scenarios with this kind of vehicles. So starting from this, the current legislation, a future legislation taking into account AI could be built on that. but I still see difficult that we can completely entrust an operation to artificial intelligence at the moment, because there is indeed a lack of precision, a lack of trust in the technology per se from a military perspective. So nowadays we are lucky enough not to take into account the problem of artificial intelligence as a threat in the military context, simply because it could fail. So making all the military operation fail. So there is no, it's not the problem, but should be taken into consideration from today for the future.
No, indeed, and there is an open conversation, as Elizabeth was saying before. There is ongoing talks to see how this can be regulated. We know that we're going to see also legislation coming at European level. So we're having this conversation on the basis of a little bit of information that we now have available indeed. There is another question that I think...
sorry, excuse me
go ahead.
Interrupt. Sorry, I was writing in the comment section that I wanted to actually add a few comments on Sarah's remarks, if that is okay, just 30 seconds. I think that Sarah made a very good point in pointing out the power aspect when it comes to artificial intelligence. I just wanted to stress something we should especially bear in mind when it comes to military operations. Artificial intelligence is primarily used in military operations to actually enhance the probability that the military is complying with its IHL obligations. Artificial intelligence is, for example, used to increase effectiveness of military operations, especially when it comes to the process of targeting. So this is the one narrative we should always bear in mind, that there are also very positive effects when it comes to human-machine involvement, human-machine entanglement, the whole human-machine teaming, when we think about the future combat air system, which will also be operatively active in a couple of years. So artificial intelligence can be a real enabler in military operations, but what we have to bear in mind, and now I'm coming back to what Sarah said, is that artificial intelligence also gives us great power. If we think about Project Maven, it was a project by the US Ministry of Defense. They tried to identify enemy fighters by solely interpreting its behavior, mobile data, and so on and so forth, which definitely is in non-compliance with humanitarian law. But what we have to be aware of is that there are actually two narratives. So it gives us great power on the one hand, but artificial intelligence can also be a significant enabler in military operations. And this is actually the gap we somehow have to handle in future debates on a regulation of AI or lethal autonomous weapon systems.
Absolutely, which goes a little bit back to the fact that the technology is not bad in itself. It's a way it's used that make it bad or good for us. There are two questions that I wanted to raise before we close the debate. One of them, because I actually been thinking a lot about that. That one is perhaps it might be necessary to introduce some general compulsory insurance for financial protection against physical or other injuries resulting from manufacturing of the algorithm. Because one of the questions when we talk about artificial intelligence is, if something like that happened, and we were talking about someone is killed or someone has an impact on his financial or his finance because of an AI decision, who is actually responsible to pay to compensate for what happened? And if we think that it's AI, then there wouldn't be anyone who do that, right? So this question about who should be paying for the actions, who is responsible practically for that, it's a valid question. So maybe I was seeing Basanta nodding very strongly, so maybe you would like to react to this one.
Well, I'm not an expert on this because I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's a major issue with the mock trial we held. Is what's the point of deleting an AI or I don't know, scrapping the drone? What does it actually, what does it actually do? I think the interesting part here is if you actually, for example, force an insurance to take down its AI system, then this will incur costs for the insurance, which will then deter it maybe from being so sloppy with its discrimination monitoring in its next AI system. But then again, you're actually punishing the insurance company. And not so much the AI, because the AI doesn't care. So I think if you want your prosecution to have some kind of impact, you have to go towards someone who actually feels loss.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I want to raise a last question. I'm going to address to Sarah because I think she might have a strong opinion on this one. And is that it's also a political level. It is interesting to discuss how far AI will empower autocratic governments to embrace this total Orwellian world. There is definitely no way back from AI in our life, but how do we keep the benefits of it? This question of power imbalances, institutions having control over our lives through AI. Sarah, what do you think about this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in all of the arguments around the benefits of AI, we need to be a little bit skeptical. Not to say that there are no benefits, of course there are, with any type of technological project there are, but they need to be incentivized and they need to be governed so that they do. What I tried to argue in my section was that when we say these arguments about benefits, number one, often there are very little proof of them, but number two, we obscure a broader underlying fuel behind the AI industry, which is profit. In the military example that was given before, yes, there may be some benefits, some efficiency, but this is a part of a broader narrative of increasing the access of states to technology, but also increasing the market power of technology companies that sell AI. And where are those technology companies primarily based? Who are these companies primarily run by? This is a huge concentration of power in the US, in China, in many places in the global north. And who are the main operators of those, who are the main benefiters of those, who are the main designers? They're often white people, male people, cis people, people without disabilities, and therefore we centralize their worldview in the AI project, which is sort of why I was trying to argue that AI is in some way guilty, not just because of the tool or the technology or the Excel spreadsheet, but the whole ideology of it. It's geared toward more expansion, more private company involvement in state affairs, and more government use of invasive technologies, which either surveil us, discriminate us against us, or in some ways, and in the case of the military context, physically threaten us in the case of our physical security in the military context.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. We've run out of time, but I would like to thank you so much to our speakers for this very insightful discussion. I think we have an open debate that is going to keep on building up over the years, especially when we see the new legislation coming up. We have at European level some legislative projects in the pipeline, so I'm sure that the European Development Forum is going to be keeping an eye on that and making sure that they follow very closely. And I'm sure Francesco will be there indeed. So thank you so much also to our jury for contributing to this discussion and being part of the conversation today, for all the questions that you have shared with us. Stay with us. We're going to take a 5 to 10 minutes break, and then we have the following session of this conference today. Thank you so much again for being here with us here today, and good continuation.
I'm ready, guys. I don't hear the speakers. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome from the break to the ELF Idea Accelerator, 3rd edition, The Future is Digital. We hope you had the chance to grab a cup of coffee and stretch a bit your legs. And now we're very glad to welcome you to the 2nd session of this year's Idea Accelerator. It's about next level participation, tools for citizen-driven e-democracy. And it's hosted by one of our members, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, the Project Office for Bulgaria and North Macedonia. And I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator, Mr. Ivailo Tsonev, who's project coordinator for Bulgaria and North Macedonia at the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. Ivo, welcome. Floor is yours.
Hello, Andre. Thank you very much. I hope the connection is good and you hear me well. Many thanks to the European Liberal Forum for inviting me with a slot at today's event to lead this session on citizen-driven e-democracy tools. Of course, I would also like to thank all of you who decided to follow this session. Please note any questions that might come to you during the session and send them to us in the Zoom chat box or as a comment during the Facebook live stream. And we will address those during the question and answer session at the end. Just to give you the context, today's topic was tackled during the Citizen Advocacy through Digital Tools project by ELF that included 3 fact-finding workshops, the production of a research publication, and an international conference held in February. As a result, also a short animated video was produced, which we will play in a bit. The session steps on the results of the project and sheds light on some terms from the title of the event, namely what citizen-driven e-democracy is in practice and why does it matter. With no doubt, information and communication technologies touch upon every aspect of our lives. We do shopping online, we consume media online, we rent cars through apps, socialize virtually. But when it comes to politics and decision-making, things still remain a little bit different. Processes are still led and organized in a way they used to be a decade ago, a century ago, or even centuries ago. The vast potential of technologies to enhance transparency, to ensure broad deliberation, and true inclusion of citizens in policymaking through the state, through formal state-led channels, remain highly isolated, and working practices remain single cases rather than established practice. Technologies, however, have learned us to perceive us in the center and to actively engage with the environment around us. And politics cannot be excluded from this trend. Evidences now clearly show that people remain interested in decision-making, and simply participating in once in 4 years remains highly not sufficient for them. In the absence of satisfactory formats and tools for participation, citizens actively look for bottom-up engagement and develop the necessary tools for participation on their own. And today, this is easily enabled through technologies. This brings to our attention the concept of citizen-driven e-democracy, an already started processes of harnessing the potential of digital tools for bottom-up initiatives with a goal to support formal decision-making or to establish alternatives where citizens somehow feel that politics do not really match their expectations. More insights to the topic, as well as some key takeaways for the further promotion of the citizen-driven e-democracy tools. Now, I'm glad to present you through a short video. And I would like to ask Andrei kindly to play the video.
Across the EU and beyond, trust in traditional political actors, such as political parties and elected representatives, has weakened. Overall, electoral turnout has also decreased. Despite these trends, citizens remain interested in public decision-making and politics and actively look for new ways to take part in political life. Here, digitalisation provides great opportunities. Technology has true potential for remodelling the democratic concept of today's public policy making. Citizen-driven e-democracy tools are developed and run exclusively by citizens, civic groups and organisations, with the goal of creating more responsive, transparent and accountable governance and policy making. This can be achieved by either making traditional modes of participation easier and more comprehensible, or by providing alternatives that empower citizens to make their voices heard. These initiatives generally aim at fostering deliberation, transparency and participation, if not all of these aspects together. An analysis of best practices suggests that developers interested in enabling, engaging or empowering tools for citizens should consider the following 5 hints. 1. Make sure to gain trust from the public. Gaining the trust from decision makers, civil servants and citizens is essential to a tool's success. Citizens have to learn about the existence of your tool and understand why engagement makes a difference. Ultimately, the impact of your tool depends on the number of people who support and use it. 2. Build a user-friendly tool. A great idea cannot flourish if its technical interface is not up to date and if it fails to catch people's attention. 3. Know that there is a high chance you will start working on your tool as a volunteer. Over time, however, different sources of funding can help you professionalize further. Public money plays an important role in civic innovation, but a creative and innovative business model can also represent a good way forward. 4. Be aware that you might face initial skepticism from authorities, politicians or administrations towards your tool, even if your idea is designed to help improve politics. The most common challenges faced relate to the establishment of a certain level of cooperation with authorities. And lastly, link the launch of your tool with a specific problem, event or something similar that shows the necessity of your tool. Elections and parliamentary processes have often been used as the trigger for setting up a tool, for example. Citizen-driven e-democracy can make our joint decision-making more open and inclusive. Let's work together to get there. For more information on the topic, check out the publication Next Level Participation, Citizen-Driven E-Democracy Tools.
As presented at the end, this video is based on the Next Level Participation publication. The research publication includes a conceptual part, as well as a practice-based part of 15 showcased and analyzed good practices from throughout Europe. A link to the publication will be posted in the chat box for you. Definitely, citizen-driven e-participation comes in various shapes and forms, and the tools differ. They differ vastly depending on the level of citizen engagement, where they can either enhance transparency, for example, or enable true participation. They could also differ in the levels of their dependence from authorities for the achievement of their goals. They could also differ depending on the level of their implementation, being it local, national, or even, why not, also European. With this, it is great pleasure for me to welcome at this event the leaders of 2 showcased good practices in the publication. Both of them have developed and are currently running innovative tools for engagement with legislative processes, but of course touch on this particular issue from different angles that were already touched upon. These are Maja Zimmerman, General Manager of Today's A New Day from Slovenia, and Anja Emerson, Senior Project Manager at My Voice from Latvia. During the discussion that follow, please be invited to send us your questions in the chat box here on Zoom, or also as a comment on Facebook. And we will address them during the question and answers session. So hello, Maya and Anya. I hope you're doing very well, and thank you very much for taking part in this event.
Hi.
Hi, Eva. Thank you for letting us to share our experience.
Thank you also. And just going straight actually to the discussion, well, Anya, could you, may I please give you the floor to briefly describe the My Voice project and how the idea was conceived? What are the objectives? How does it work?
Yes, so ManaValsts.lv, it's a name in Latvian, it's My Voice. So it is a citizen initiative platform. We actually are celebrating 10-year anniversary this summer since it was launched. And its objective and mission always have been to involve Latvian citizens in politics, not only once every 4 years, but on everyday basis. And we have succeeded in doing that. This year, we have around 400,000 users in Latvia. That is almost 20% of Latvian population. And yeah, the important added value that we are doing in our platform is we do a lot of work backstage. We actually have quality criteria that each initiative must meet before publishing. So we are consulting initiative authors if needed, and we have a volunteer network with academics, lawyers, companies that actually on everyday basis help to improve initiatives that are being published. And I will share how the platform looks. Yep, here it is. So just shortly to show you that it's quite easy to use, easy to understand, basic technological solution, but it actually works very well in this way. So we have initiative signatures, and this is an example of initiative. It's easy to understand. It's quite short. And yes, when mostly people want to submit initiatives to the parliament, and it is written in the law that for parliament to accept the initiative, it must collect 10,000 signatures. And when it's done, parliament members has to vote at least one time in the parliamentary session to what to do further. Should it be analyzed in some committee or working group, or it will be rejected. But mostly 95% of times it's pushed forward for more analytics and work on that. So yeah, this is shortly how it works. I will answer probably other questions in your following question.
Absolutely, thank you. And of course, now I would like to invite Maya. May you also please briefly describe your the parliamentary project for citizen engagement, actually how the idea came to life, what are the objectives and how does it work?
Thank you for the opportunity to present Parlameter. So Parlameter is a digital platform that presents parliamentary data in a more transparent and accessible way. We built Parlameter because we were frustrated with the Slovenian parliament's website, where data was scattered around various subpages in machine unreadable PDFs. We believe that data that is hard to find and data that you can't analyze isn't really open data. And that's why we really thought about how we can present parliamentary data in a more transparent and accessible and user-friendly way. So Parlameter collects voting records and presents them by MP and presents them also by government and opposition. We also collect all voting events connected to a specific piece of legislation. And we also prepare summaries of each piece of legislation, so that really to make it more accessible and really to present information from different perspectives or from all relevant perspectives. Parlameter also publishes all transcripts and allows users to share specific or smaller parts of transcripts on social media. And we also, which is really important, we allow search through those transcripts and through all legislation, which again allows greater access or allows users to focus on a specific topic that is of interest to them. And this really allows us, collecting all this data allowed us to further prepare analysis of certain aspects of parliamentary data. So for example, we analyze which MP votes most often with another MP. So like who votes together, etc. We built Parliameter especially for journalists and researchers, and maybe the most interested part of the public, because maybe Parliameter isn't really a tool that you go to when the parliament publishes a specific piece of legislation, because journalists report on that much quicker than we are able to collect that data. But what Parliameter really does, it has the biggest collection of parliamentary data and this meta-analysis of parliamentary data that's really useful for academics, for researchers, and really it's so useful that we now use Parliameter, we now adapt to Parliameter not only in Slovenia, but also in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and parts of the analysis will also be done, or we're just starting to work in Ukraine. Yeah, so this is for now, shortly.
Great review, thank you. And Anya, similar projects for citizen collaboration from other countries are often supported by parliaments or governments, and this brings certain visibility and level of acceptance for the project. But how did you alone manage to gain the necessary level of acceptance by the parliament to review, to consider the submitted by you legislation initiatives?
Yes, actually, your video that you showed at the beginning was a precise explanation how it's possible. We could relate a lot with that. So firstly, we believe that we have managed to build this trust between citizens, media, parliamentarian members. And partly this is because of the rather high quality control we are doing behind the scenes. And we are also all the time consulting authors and people who interact with our platform and wants to push their idea forward. So we are accepting realistic democratic initiatives, not plain petitions. So this is what parliamentarians and the policymakers love about this. As well as the media knows that they can trust our platform. We are transparent and they always report on new initiatives and those that have succeeded or some failed in the parliament or other institutions. And secondly, this is really important that we didn't do it alone. So before the platform was launched in 2011, a civic lobbying process to open parliament for citizen initiatives actually took place. So for a year, I think. So well-known experts, NGO members, other friends helped to do this lobbying work together with us. And we had to create this alliance between different party members in parliament. So they would initiate the law of opening parliament for citizen initiatives. And yeah, of course, this skepticism and resistance, of course, was there. But as I said, the founders and together with this support alliance actually were really persistent, and with the smart lobbying work they succeeded and they did it.
Thank you. And maybe what naturally follows, like topic, what I would address to Maya. Maya, digitalization provides unprecedented means for public reach and dissemination of information. How can we harness, however, the potential of digital tools to facilitate true engagement and actually to flip over the traditional concept of informed citizen into active and involved citizen? Do we need to update our understanding of politics and policy making, where this should start from?
Yeah, thank you for this information. So firstly, I think information and participation are interconnected. More informed public is, more likely it will be active and it will be engaged. So it is kind of still a prerequisite. So we shouldn't disregard the informed citizen. But secondly, I think really, truly, as you said, it's not enough to give citizens information. It's important that we build infrastructure to participate. Now, to use an analogy, if you give someone a ball, but they live next to a highway and they don't have a basketball court and a basketball and a basket, it won't do them much good, that basketball, right? The same way with information. If we just give citizens information, but we don't give them tools to participate, that information will just lead to a lot of frustration. Now, the part about building infrastructure is challenging because, as you said in your intro, the concept of politics and political participation in decision-making is very much outdated, or a lot of decision makers or those who are in power to build these processes aren't very proactive in building engaging processes. So often it's up to us in the civil society to build these new opportunities to participate. And then maybe thirdly, what I would add is, I think participation needs to be nurtured. We shouldn't expect to just give citizens opportunities to participate and expect that it will follow that they will participate. We need to build participatory processes on the lowest level possible because that really has a snowball effect where if citizens think or see that they can achieve change through a participatory process, it's more likely they will participate on other participatory processes and political processes. So if I can change something in my local community that's very small, that will still encourage me and make me probably a more engaged engaged citizens, just because it has this multiplying effect where citizens see that they can achieve change.
Thanks. And Anya, our study shows that citizen e-participation tools are generally initiated and run by so-called digital social entrepreneurs, possessing with substantial IT knowledge. These people generally start also with zero funding. What would be your advice to organizations and civic groups with great ideas who lack, however, the specific IT skills to develop projects on their own? How can they actually foster and survive and push forward their ideas?
Yeah, so firstly, I believe that counts for every idea, believe in the idea and create these alliances. So understand that you shouldn't do it alone. We actually have in Latvian this saying that alone you're not a fighter, especially if you lack skills or some kind of resources. And secondly, find other like-minded persons who could fill up these missing skills. In our case, our platform was started by entrepreneur and marketing specialists. And I believe that this marketing skill is extremely important in our digital age. But the project succeeded and was recognized by Parliament only because these two founders had created this broad alliance of friends, NGOs, friendly parliamentary members, and supporters that shared the same idea. As well, they were ready to publicly endorse it and stand behind it. And persistence actually is a key in the city's civic lobbying process. So yeah, these factors are really important.
We can't hear you. You're muted. So.
Thanks. I would also like to invite the participants who follow us on Facebook or Zoom also to submit their questions, and we will also have the opportunity to others one or two questions in a minute. My parliamentary is example of a project that was developed on a voluntary basis by the team of Danes and Notan, which however received funding by Google in a very crucial and timely moment. This helped to professionalize and upgrade the platform, to build new tools, to polish the existing tools, to eventually export the projects to other countries. How could entry-level projects grow financially sustainable, in your opinion? How could those projects attract funding or other means to operate and let them survive and develop?
So firstly, I would really like to, I agree with everything Anya said about being persistent and focusing on outreach and basically promoting your work. I think NGOs often forget about that part a bit. Our story specifically was that Parlameter was the first project of our organization before the organization existed, and it started in the basement of one of our co-workers, colleagues. But we were really privileged in two aspects. Firstly, we could develop this product without funding because we could develop it in our free time on voluntary basis for 2 years before we even got any funding. And this really helped us get that funding. And then secondly, as you mentioned, we received Google funding that allowed us to basically enter the NGO sector, become an organization, professionalize. But we were really privileged here again because we received substantial funding that allowed us to take that risk, right? To take that leap from the private sector into the NGO sector. Because if we received 15 or 30,000 euros, probably we would not be able to afford that. But the funding specifically allowed us to professionalize. So in our experience, for us, what was really important was that we already had a product somewhat developed when we were asking for funding. I think donors really aren't that much interested in the ideas that are in your head, but they want to see proof of concept, first draft, beta version, whatever it is, right? So when you ask me what are the ways for people to get sustainable funding, is try to develop your products as much as possible with limited funding that we are aware you have, right? And then how do you get, like, if you want to develop your product, maybe there are some ways how you can do that with limited funding. One way would be crowdfunding. I think Eastern Europe specifically, really this aspect of funding is very underdeveloped, has the potential, but really hasn't taken off yet. So that's one venue to look at. The second venue is maybe we don't even need money, but we need time. So I think more employers should be encouraged to give their workers maybe a day to work on social projects with social impact and so on. So basically trying to find ways how you can develop your product as much as possible before you go pitching it to your donors, investors, and so on.
Thanks. And we have question from the audience. Maybe I would pose it to you, to both of you, concerning the democratic participation exactly through digital terms. Do we consider the different capacities of different age groups? So should there be different participation approaches or different tools for the different age groups, or maybe the different aspects of targeting or the objectives of particular, and the issues that are subject to the particular issues and engagements should differ?
I can respond to that. So besides Parlameter, we run several other projects. One is we developed or adapted a digital platform for participatory budgeting, which is when a municipality gives part of their budget to citizens to suggest projects and then vote on those projects. So here specifically, we have really a big challenge where you're trying to engage people from 15-year-old to 90-year-old. And in my view, in our view, the best option is to recognize those limitations in electronic digital participation and try to engage them. So for example, in this specific tool for participatory budgeting, we allow both digital and offline physical participation. I think that really allows you to engage the biggest possible public, those who feel comfortable, and actually it's easier for them to participate digitally, and also those who do not feel comfortable participating online, or maybe don't even have the means to do that.
Yeah, I can continue. 100%. I agree that it should be specialized also for the groups, but I believe it takes a sort of maturity of the organization to start doing that, because when we started, it was a project, there was an initiative, everyone went okay, and after some time we realized, okay, there is this group that are missing out. Speaking here about the seniors, and now we are actually few years later, we are actually developing these regional hubs where seniors can come on the ground, and people will help them to actually vote on the computer. So it takes a time and maturity to understand that, okay, we should now focus also on the groups that wasn't able to participate in full extent before.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a nutshell, great sharing of hands-on know-how in the topic. And I'm wishing you best of success with your projects and further innovative initiatives for engagement. Please keep us well informed, and we do commit to further promote the issue and also your projects. With this, our session has come to an end. Our efforts to further research the topic and promote citizen-centrist politics and citizen-driven politics have just started, however. We remain open for partnerships and collaborations and would be glad to remain in touch with all of you in front of the small screen, and also with you, dear Anya and Maya. Thank you very much. According to the program, it is time for 8-minute break, and the next session will start at 11:40. Thank you very much for your interest in our session, and see you in a bit.
Welcome back to the European Liberal Forum Idea Accelerator, third edition, The Future is Digital. Welcome back to those who joined us from the morning. Welcome to those who just joined us for this amazing session that we're gonna have on social media, youth political activism in the age of digital technologies, which is hosted by the European Liberal Youth, LIMEC. Welcome to those who are joining us on Facebook as well. Please write your questions in the comments and we will make sure that the speakers will get them. We have two more amazing sessions lined up and I'm very, very happy to welcome you to this third session organized by LIMEC. I'm happy to introduce the moderator of this session, Ms. Laia Comerma, who's a bureau member of the European Liberal Youth, LIMEC. Laia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So thank you for selecting LIMEC to organize this session. The title of this session is On Social Media, Youth Political Activism in the Age of Digital Technologies. We organize this session because we are living in an age where everyone, but especially young people, spend a very high amount of their time connected, but we now new dilemmas are emerging. What is this kind of connection? Is the new is a new way of connected physical isolation, or is the new way that we will connect with each other in the future? What are the technologies, the new innovations that are facilitating all this, and what kind of digital society are we creating, and what is in which political movements, political regulations is it transforming? For this session, we have two amazing speakers. We have already one of us here. She's Joana Barbany. She's the Director General for Civil Society in the Catalan government. She has been very active in promoting women and girls in STEM subjects and in technology, but she's also responsible for the digitalization of digital society and all the technology and communications that are around that. The second speaker will be Moritz Görner from FDP Germany. She's an MEP at the European Parliament, and she's very involved in civil societies, civil liberties, justice, and home affairs. And she's responsible for dealing with China as well. So before we start, for this session, we have prepared 5 questions that we would like to ask our audience. So for this, we will launch 5 surveys. And this way you will also take part of the debate. The speakers will be addressing the same questions as you, and we will be comparing what is their expert input with the more social, broader input. And we believe that this contrast will be interesting to see how society is in line with them or not. So the first question that we will address is, has the pandemic sparked a new wave of innovation towards the digitalization of our social connections? And we can launch the first survey. Is it launched? Can you confirm it to me? Yes. Okay, we will wait 10 more seconds. Meanwhile, we have our second speaker here. Hello, Moritz.
Hello, I'm so sorry. That's digital. I was not. My Wi-Fi was not working, and I tried to fix it. Sorry.
It's the problems of home working, which we will address today in our session as well. Okay, so we can close the first survey. And meanwhile, I will repeat the question also for Moritz. So, has the pandemic sparked a new wave of innovation towards the digitalization of our social connections? And can we see the results?
We are not seeing them. Maybe the participants are. Okay, while I get the results, we will start with the speakers addressing the same question. Maybe Joanna, would you like to start?
I'd like to know the results before, because I don't know if I'm right or not. What did they say?
Yes, that would be great. I've asked them, but I don't have the answer yet.
Okay.
So 91%
don't worry.
yes.
Okay.
Whoa, there's a huge majority in favor of yes.
I agree with the audience, of course. I think that we've progressed a lot, but we've progressed this year the same level that we would do if in a normal way that it would take to us from 7 to 8 years. I mean, we are now at the same point as it would be, you know, in a normal situation in 7 or 8 years. So we are carry on that. In any case, for me, it's sad that we have to do so out of necessity. So not only the citizens, but also from the governments, okay, and from businesses. So I think that we should work on that, not because the pandemic, because we need to do that, you know. It's like the student syndrome that we are always doing the homework the last day. So I think that as government, we should work on that, not because the pandemic, but I agree that the pandemic has sparked this kind of doing things. And I think that the important here is to work on digital society, on digital capabilities. I will talk on that later. And because if people is not, you know, doesn't know how to work with technology or on technology, they won't be on this movement, and they will be out of the society. So we need to work with them for keeping going on this innovation process.
Thank you very much. Moritz, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I agree with Joanna and also with the panelists. I think we've seen great progress. I think it was especially because when you were talking about digital before, when you would try to do something via a video conference, there would always be someone who would be doubtful and saying, "Oh, is it really? Can we do it?" And some ideas why it's not possible were always there, and now we just had to do it. But I also agree with Joanna. It's actually sad that it's out of a necessity, and I think we also have to already think about what can we do after the pandemic. I think the best of both worlds. We have to achieve that. Of course, a video conference like that, especially for European politics, is very good because, you know, we can reach more people. But of course, to discuss in a personal way, sitting next to each other and so on, has also huge value. So we have to think about when to use what, and maybe to find the best out of both worlds. And that will be, I think, the main challenge in the future.
Yes, indeed, how we can get the best of both worlds. At this point, I would like to remind the participants that they can send us questions, and they will send them to me, and I will post them to the speakers. We will divide this session on the 5 blocks according to the 5 questions that we will learn. So don't wait to send your questions in the end, because we will move from one topic to the other. In this regard, maybe just one very brief question that I would like to pose to the speakers. I don't know if you have the answer to that, but who has been mostly responsible for this innovation? Has it been new startups, established big businesses?
I think it should be from everyone. I mean, I think it's very important what the governments do on that, okay? And of course, citizens. I mean, citizenship has the obligation to work on that, and of course, the company. So and the university. So for me, they are the quadruple helix. You know, the public sector, the government, the university or knowledge centers, companies, and citizens, and also all the citizens movements also. So for me, we need to, you know, to work together and go together to that, because if not, it's impossible to to improve or to spark that.
Moritz?
I agree with what Joanna said, and I think we also saw that new ideas in this crisis, especially also startups, were incredibly helpful. I don't want to say that Zoom, where we are having this conference right now, is a startup, but it, actually, to be honest, I was not aware that it's there, and now it's my daily life. So of course, new innovation, especially when people have to adapt when there is a completely new situation, there are possibilities also for new players, new startups, new ideas, and innovation to come in. And I think we also saw that. And especially after the pandemic, we will also deal with other topics. We will still have digital transition. We will have a green transition. And I think if we want to have this innovation, we also need new players and new ideas and an open environment for that. And I think so that is really important. Innovation, startups, but also other bigger players who adapt, who have new ideas. And I think we also saw that.
I think Laia is not here.
That's challenges and opportunities of digitization, right? We are experiencing it.
We are used to, so we will manage that.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Moritz,
yes.
exactly? Because I don't know you.
I'm a member of the European Parliament, and I'm working on civil liberties issues and digitization and stuff like that. And yeah, so we are also working out of our home. and
where are you now physically at home? But where in Europe?
In Düsseldorf. It's in the western part of Germany. Yes, because I'm sometimes in Brussels, but of course, right now it's also difficult with travels. For me, it's not so difficult, but for other colleagues. So yeah.
And how's the situation in Germany about the pandemic and the lockdown and everything? How is it going?
So right now we are in the third wave, more or less. Cases are going up, and there's lots of discussion about more restrictions and so on. So I hope that we will somehow manage to have not too many cases until we are vaccinated soon. I think the vaccination is picking up pace everywhere in Europe, and I really hope that we manage to come through these next 2 months or something until we have this situation. But right now it's really difficult. But through this whole pandemic, I think Germany was doing okay. So we never had really this situation when our hospitals and everything got completely overwhelmed. So yeah.
And are the schools open, or they are just closed, or are the children going at school, or they are at home?
That depends. So we have states in Germany, so different states, and I think
Laia's back. Here.
Sorry very much for that.
We were just talking, don't worry. I know everything about Germany now.
Yes.
Perfect, that's great.
And we all know that this is what's happening, right? All the time, because so many people are working digitally, and sometimes, we also have to do something with the infrastructure.
Yes.
That's also a big problem, right?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, Joanna is involved with the team that is building the infrastructure in Catalonia for 5G network, if I'm not wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Great, but let's move to the second question that we will pose to our audience. Have new digital technologies empowered our society and made it more inclusive, or has it created more detachment and inequality? some version of this will be posted to the participants, but when I have the answers, the speakers will address them.
Maybe I can already start while the answers coming in, because I'm not really decided. It's really difficult to say. I think we saw different trends. On the one side, I want you to one example, which is debated highly, is like maybe there's a generational divide, and that some older people are left behind or something. But I also experienced that an older woman, we had a discussion, online discussion, and I was saying, can we do this online discussion and so on? And she said, yeah, that's fine for me. I'm used to it now, and it's even better because now with my 75 years, I don't want to go out of the house in the evening to go to a political event. I can do this online right now. That's even better for me. So I think it's really difficult. It has the tendencies to create more differences and more inequality. But I think we have to be clever and find out what the concrete problems are and bring it together. So I think it's not black or white.
It's amazing that you express this opinion, because it's precisely the result that we got with the poll to our audience. It's 52% more detached, 48% empowered society, and more inclusive society. So it's 50-50. Joanna, what do you have to say about that?
The same, of course. I think that technology by itself, it does not create inequalities or nothing. It's the use that people do to the technology. So I think that we need to work for having less inequality in the world. And we have to create active policies to move, for me, in three different ways, okay? Because I think that technology is in fact a democratization tool, but we need to work on that, and we need to work on three main ways. The first one is to work in the access gap, as you told before. We need to have access to technology. I mean, physical access. We need to have all territories with connected by 5G or 4G or fiber. It's very, very necessary, because if you don't have access to technology, you are increasing this gap. So it's very, very important for me. Access to internet network, and also to different speeds of quality, okay, of the connectivity. We need also to work in how people has access to equipment. It's very important. There are people that can't buy any laptop or any computer. So we need to work on that as a public sector, I think, because it's also a matter of inequality. And also the costs of ICT. I think it should be a public service, the connectivity. So we need to work as a public service. So this is for me, the first gap, the access gap. Also, the second one would be the use that we do, the use that we have, or we use technology, because the internet usage is different from for different sectors. I mean, it's not the same use for young people that older people, or people who's living in different ways of different territories in Europe. So with use we do, and it's if we use it for education, or for just being connected, or for buying something like by e-commerce. And at least we need to work on the technology, on this knowledge gap. I'm always talking about knowledge gap, and we need to educate people or citizens, and to work with them, because the level of knowledge, it's really, for me, it's important. It's the main thing that we have to work for having less inequality in with our citizens. So we need to, because we find generational and socioeconomical factors that cause this gap, okay, or this inequality. So we need to work on this. For me, the three ways: access gap, usage gap, and knowledge gap.
Yes, that's perfect. Are you working on this from your own respective from the levels that you're involved in policy, either at the European Parliament or at the Catalan government region?
Yeah, we've worked with KPMG. I think that it's a company that works on different projects, and we've detected that there is, in fact, risk of having this unequal access to technology. It can increase, so we need to work, in fact, and now on this, just teaching people or having more fiber, and we are working in a social technological bonus for people from Catalonia, because for us it's like having access to energy, having access to technology. So we need to work on that as a public service.
Yeah, I'm working not so much concretely on that because it's more in competence of the member states, of course. But of course, it's really important for us because we are looking more at it in the European Parliament from a regulation angle. What can we do? And of course, some politicians always try to maybe find new laws, new regulations for that. Sometimes I think we have to really work on this knowledge gap, what Joanna mentioned, because I think you cannot solve the problem alone with laws. You also need to educate, to help people. I think so. This is really important because on the one side we don't have so much competences when it comes to building the knowledge. On the other hand, we have the main competences when it comes to regulating, for example, big internet platforms and so on. So I think we have to really have in mind the knowledge gap and what we can do about it. But more or less, we are focusing on regulation because of the competences. That would be my angle or our angle in the European Parliament.
And I think also, Laia, that we should work with people, because there are people that they don't think that to be connected or to have internet access or to have a computer it's necessary. So for me, I can understand that that there's people that they think that it's not necessary to have connection, or that internet is not necessary for them. And I don't know why. It's a lack of conscience, or I don't know why. So there is for me an important way or important task to do, that it's just say people that internet and having digital knowledge is very important for reducing this gap. Not because if not, they will be increasing day by day, and it will be impossible to manage that in the future.
Yes, this pedagogical task. Actually, questions are kicking in very quickly from the participants because this is a very interesting topic for us. Let me pose the first one to whichever wants to.
Hi, welcome everybody. As you can see, we have some technical issues and we're gonna get back to Laia in a second. But until we do that, I can actually continue with the questions that Laia started, because I have them from the participants right in front of me. But just to double check, Jana, Moritz, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect, I can hear you as well. So let's go for some questions from the audience. We have one from Manolis Polychronides. Thank you for that. How would you define inclusion? Is it just technical access to discussion or the creation of a culture of participation, support, and empowerment?
I don't hear you. Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. How would you define inclusion? Is it just technical access to discussion or the creation of a culture of participation, support, and empowerment?
Okay. I think we need to talk about inclusion in a whole way, everything. inclusion of course, in education, but in how society, it's talking each other and how we communicate, how we buy, how we work. So for me, inclusion, it's everything. I mean, I have a whole view of that. I don't know if Michael what they say by Moritz. I don't know what they said, but it's a whole.
Yeah, I would agree with what Joanna said. I think we have to think about both dimensions, and of course they are different to tackle, but I think it's about both, and I think the second dimension is even more important.
Okay, perfect. While we answer the other two questions that we have, we will start addressing the third one that we will launch to the participants, which is there a generational and or gender gap when it comes to digitalization? So please launch this poll. And Joanna, would you like to address this one first?
I think that the audience would say or will say yes. I think that there is a generational and gender gap. And the pandemic doesn't help to work on that. As I told you before, we've been working with KPMG, and the main conclusions are that, and for Catalonia, but I'm sure that for all Europe will be the same, and is that age creates a digital gap, especially when it comes to the use and knowledge after 55 years old, and mostly after 65. So in this line, all the generations tend to establish less links with technology and therefore less uptake and advantage from it. And on the contrary, younger generations are more connected and they use it a lot. And based in age, we can see that younger generations are the ones that use the different digital services, while they use this less when from people for about 55 years old, and especially after 65. So younger generations lead the use of practically all services, with a special focus on social networks, instant messaging, learning materials, and buying things with internet. And on the contrary, people who's older, they just use internet for being connected. So there is a really, for me, age gap here. And also in the gender gap, we can see that not for young generations, but for people who are more who are more fit than 54, there is a gender gap, important gender gap. I mean that women are less connected than men in general.
So there's a gender gap on top of a generational gap that even makes it worse. Actually, the audience agrees with you. 86% of our audience said yes. Moritz, would you like to come over?
So I absolutely agree with what Joanna said. But maybe I don't have the numbers or the facts on that. I don't know if there are surveys out there already, but my feeling is that maybe the gender gap, the generational gap is getting a little bit smaller through the pandemic, because my feeling is that more, it's a personal feeling. Maybe Juana has the numbers, but I think that younger people are generally already online, and that lots of older people through the pandemic really tried to and start to use more digital services. But that can be just a personal, personal experience. I don't have the numbers on that. But maybe that helped a little bit. But Joanna, maybe you know more about the concrete numbers.
Yeah, I'd like to talk also about the gender gap, and it's real that the pandemic doesn't help anything. I mean, we are worse now than we were, because while we were on a lockdown, who was at home taking care of children, taking care of their parents, taking care of doing, at least in Catalonia, in Spain, I don't know in the rest, if in the rest of Europe it's the same, but the women now we are worse than we were before, because we lose some kind of, I don't know what, but we are in a not good position. We need to work on that, and not us. I mean, not people who has social economic situation, normal social economic situation. I mean, women who are older than 55, that they maybe don't have access to internet. This kind of women, they are everyday worst. So we need to work with them.
Yes, but the pandemic has reinforced gender roles because home was traditionally a feminized place, and now we are all confined at home. So it makes sense what Joanna is saying. But I think that Morit's perception is very common. So it's good that the numbers help us on us. Let us address one question from the audience. Do you think that reskilling is also fundamental? If new generations must be educated for a more digital future, but equal opportunities should be offered to employees, for example, in the public sector, who want to learn how to use computers and digital means?
Well, reskilling it's necessary, and I think that we should work on that. And for example, as you know, in the ICT sector, there's a lack of positions. So if we don't work on reskilling, we won't have people working on that. So for me, I think, and you are young, but you know that now education, you have to be always in permanent education, not as before that we just studied some career or something and we just take 20 years working in the same place. And now I think that the new generations, but also generations like mine, we need to be or every time getting education and just thinking in new things and having reskilling skills and working on that because it's necessary for me. And as you know, the jobs, they are changing every day. So I think that as a society, we need to work on reskilling and new skills for everyone, not just hard skills, but also soft skills.
Yes, Moritz, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add to that I think with artificial intelligence, it will be even faster. We will have more and more innovation and new technology. And of course, so we will have to reskill a lot of people, especially because some jobs which are now done by humans will just being taken over. But I'm not pessimistic about it. It's not that we have not enough to do for people, but we have to skill them to work in the right places, and maybe to even prioritize in a society. We should even more prioritize work, human work, where it's really needed. So empathy in care jobs, in creativity, things what digital artificial intelligence cannot do. And I think that's also a huge potential. So it's a huge potential, but we have to really think about reskilling, to think maybe also our whole education system in a completely new way, because it should just concentrate more on competences, not on gen and on skills, but showing people how to learn because they will have to adapt and reskill within their life all the time. So that's a huge huge problem also for our whole education sector, and we have to change it very fast.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's move on from education now to a more political subject, maybe. And let's launch the fourth question to our audience, which is, has digitalization promoted surveillance or big brother states, read China, for example, or rather fomented cybersecure ways to protect citizens' data, to empower our citizens? Let's hear what the audience has to say, because I will guess that in Europe the view is maybe more homogeneous, but if we took a global perspective, maybe it wouldn't be as clear. The results will tell us. Moritz, would you like to address this question first while we wait for the results?
So I think the audience will say that it leads to more surveillance and so on, and I think that's true because not it's what we do with it. It's not digitalization means more surveillance. It means what rules do we give it? And I think especially when we look to China, we see that they use digital ways to have really a surveillance state. We have a big discussion in Europe with the GDPR, with also other regulations when it comes to digital, to really make sure that digitalization is not leading to more surveillance. It leads to more possibilities for individuals, and I think that's also what we want to tackle with the Digital Service Act, with new regulation, to make sure that we have more control over big players, big platforms, Facebook, Google, etc., and that we make sure that the user has more possibilities and more transparency what's happening there. So I think that's one of the crucial questions, because it's about in what society do we really live, do we really want to live? And I think it's decided within the next 10, 20 years. Is there a European or a liberal or a democratic digital sphere, or will there be mainly a surveillance sphere like in China and so on?
So before Joanna, I would like to share the results from the audience. This one is not as clear-cut as the others. 63% in favor of surveillance or Big Brother state, 37% in favor of empowered citizens, cyber secure data. So Joanna, would you like to come in?
Well, I think that it depends on which territory or about which territory we are talking. I mean, as you know, there are 3 different models on that. The first model, as you said, Laia, is the Chinese model, where government acts like a big brother and they do with the data wherever they want. There's the second model, that could be the North American model, where I think that these are the companies who take all data and do things. I don't say bad things. I mean, I say do things with this data. I mean, companies are the data and they use it, not only data of their workers, but also data of citizens. I mean, you know, all things related to Google that we are talking about every day about that. So Chinese model is government, North American model, I think that the power is in companies' hands. And then the third model, that should be the European model, as Moritz said, where, or the middle way, where this data should be in citizens' hands. So citizens and workers should be their own owners and the data owners. But also I'm talking here on training and digital skills, because if you can access to your data, you need to know what to do with them. So it's very, very important to keep people in this kind, to keep people with capabilities, with digital capabilities, because they will have to manage with this data. So for me, there are three models, and we need to know which model Europe wants to take or wants to be.
It seems that finally Europe has given the importance and recognition that these policies have. Now Vestager is the vice president of the Commission, and the Digital Services Act that Moritz talked about has finally been shared with the Parliament, if I'm not wrong. Could you tell us a bit more about the state of all these policies, Moritz?
Yeah, so the Commission proposed the Digital Service Act, and also actually the Digital Markets Act, which is more about, you know, the big power and monopolies and what can, you know, how, you know, there should be a competent a market and so on. So both packages are underway, and now it's up to the legislators. So it's in the Parliament, in the European Parliament, and in the Council, the member states. And in the Parliament, we will start our work on the Digital Service Act now, and it will be a crucial discussion. And I think it will also be a difficult discussion because it's about power of big players. It's about freedom of speech, about also the problems coming from digital. So it's also not very easy. And it will be a huge fight also, I think, in the end between Parliament and Council within many legislative processes. So it will take some time, I think, but we try to hurry, especially in the Parliament, because we know how crucial it is. But really, it's maybe the first try to really have a regulation, and also other countries are looking towards us because Europe always has this effect. If we have a strong standard, normally because we are such a big market, it is transferred to other countries too, and that might have very, very positive effects if we do it right within Europe.
Thank you very much for this update. And I will pose now a question to Joanna, who comes from Henning. He thinks that the digital transformation is necessary and cannot be reversed. But in terms of democratic participation, the analog world needs to remain open for people who either cannot access digital platforms because of bad digital coverage, or who are restricted by any other causes, handicap, illiterate, language. So how does policy need to address this dilemma of people who cannot connect to the digital world?
We need, as a public government, we need to act on that. I mean, with direct helps. For example, with disabled people, we have a lot of line of grants for helping institutions who are working with disabled people to work on that, because it can be, I mean, if you are disabled people, you need to have access to internet as other people. And then we work in, as you told before, we are working especially in having all territory connected. I mean, we are fibrating, I mean, putting fiber on other territory, because as you know, Catalonia is a territory that we have mountains, not like Switzerland, but high mountains, and there are no people there, and it's very difficult to go there. But for us, having all the territory connected by fiber, it's the main important thing. So we are really investing a lot of money there, because we think that it's the matter here. It's the main focus. So yeah, it's fiber, and then giving skills and capability to citizens.
Yes, here is the rural-urban dilemma that is so popular in all Europe. So I think it's something that we all can relate to. Let's move to the final question, because time is running up, that we will pose to the audience now. So last survey: can activism and social movements coexist with a fully digital society? So what is this new form of activism? Can we remain socially active while staying at home? We'll leave 10 more seconds for the participants to answer. Would you like to, someone would like to jump in, or let's wait for the audience?
The audience would say yes, I hope, I think. I mean, it should coexist. We can stop activism. I mean, it should be there, and we need to hear what happens and to learn from there. But for that, we need a full digital society. I mean, 20 years ago, when we talk about digital gap, we just talk about having access to technology, as I told before. But now, when we talk about gap, we talk in three kinds of gap, okay? The social gap is the difference in access to information between the poor and rich people or countries. The global gap is the difference between the use of ICT between developed and developing countries. But the third gap is the democratic gap. So it's the difference between those who use technology to mobilize and participate and those who doesn't use it. So this democratic gap, we need to fight also against that. So for me, it's they are really, so we can understand one without the other one. So activism and digital society for me are the same thing, or should be the same thing, or the same, work on the same way.
Perfect. Our audience agrees with you, Joanna. 71% of them believe that yes, activism can coexist with a fully digital society. Moritz, what would you have to say on that?
I don't want to say the opposite, but I think we also see that people need to. So I think that could also be a fully digitalized society. But I hope that we will have these possibilities to meet and to mingle and so on again after the pandemic. Because I think that's also very crucial. It's great to see you. It is great to meet Joanna, and very easily from my home, and she's I think also in her home or in her office, and it would be very difficult to bring us together today. But of course, if we would have a conference now and maybe later tonight we would have maybe a drink together or something.
Yeah, sure.
It is really about bringing people together, and that's also very important for activism and politics, because it's also about feeling and trusting each other and so on. So we have to. That's what I maybe in the beginning already said. For me, a fully digitized society doesn't mean we have to meet only digital. We can use both, and we have to bring the best of both worlds together. And maybe what I think is, and before the pandemic, we should not think about we going back to before the pandemic, but we are going further. And before the pandemic, sometimes we met in person when it was not actually necessary, to be honest. In huge, so many meetings where you went to, and you have to just maybe we will also see after the pandemic, really the value of meeting personally, and maybe that will be crucial. People not traveling with business through the world to meet all the time, but maybe when you meet, then it's really we really want to meet the person, get to know each other, and have the quality of meeting in person. And I think that is the main thing what we have to tackle, and that can have huge potentials, because then you can organize yourself digitally over borders in Europe, everywhere, but you can also have this quality of meeting together, and that is a huge potential for activism in the future, to bring best of both worlds together.
We will try to make this beer possible, maybe in Brussels in the near future when we're all vaccinated.
You can invite
Julian
Laia to the beer.
I think we lost Laia again.
He's dying again. Yeah.
But I will invite you to the beer.
Okay.
Also, Joanna.
I take a note in my agenda. Don't worry.
Hi, and welcome from Brussels. And talking about beer, we are actually very close to Place de Luxembourg. So yeah, that does sound very, very good in the near future. And we're going to look forward to that. But I want to take this opportunity because we have 10 more minutes of this session. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage the participants that we have here on Zoom to write their questions in the Q&A section, and those who are watching us live on Facebook to also write their questions in the comments section. And I think that we have Laia back with us.
Yes, I'm back. Deeply apologize, but definitely here I don't have 5G. Last question from our audience. Julian asks, do you believe that developments in political education are keeping up with, I don't know what he means by political education, maybe I would say digital education, are keeping up with innovations in the increasing digitalization of political activism? And if not, how damaging is this to political activism overall?
I don't understand the question. Can you repeat, Laia?
I would say that he means whether if we have to turn to digital political activism, what kind of skills do we need for that?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Julian, if I didn't understand your question right.
Yeah, well, Moritz talked about that before. We need to teach our children or to educate our children in different skills, science we've done since now. I mean, it's not just having, you know, geography or mathematics or literature. We need to teach or to educate our children in different skills. I mean, like how to be more, how to talk with people, how to listen other people, how to be, you know, more to work with other people, to not to be yourself, to listen other people. So I think that the soft skills that now are not taught at school should be taught at school and at home for having, you know, more critical citizens working on that. Future citizens. I mean, they are now just kids, but when they will be, you know, like people, you know, old people, they should have this kind of the soft skills with them.
Laia, maybe I can touch another aspect of that question, because I think he was also asking about political education or in school. Maybe I think it's really important that that, for example, also you know, education is changing. You know, you maybe in the days before, like years before, people were teaching like, okay, this is the parliament and you know, blah blah blah. Maybe now you also have to show them, you know, this is Twitter, this is a tweet, look at this tweet, is it actual factual, is it, or is it disinformation, and so on. So I think there are new challenges, and of course education has to also to look into these new challenges and to prepare people for that.
And I think, Laia, that we should work also, we need to get rid of this idea that politicians or public sector, you know, now it's not people, usually they see us like a kind of corrupting people, or people who, you know, I mean, the people who's working in a public sector now, sometimes they are not good seeing. So I think that we should work also at schools and say children that people who's working on politics, they believe on that, and they do that because they want, not because they don't have anything more to do. And we need to, well, to have our politician people, you know, upgrade him a little bit, or them, I think.
Yes, indeed, more civic education, but also education on fake news. I think that's very important, and especially starting from a very young age, because we saw before the pandemic that young people were more active than ever on the street. We saw Fridays for Future. We had demonstrations from Barcelona to Berlin to London. But also, even during the pandemic, we saw that you cannot stop people from going to the street with Black Lives Matter, for example. So I think that finding a balance between health, but keeping the political rights, the social rights of our children and our youth, and even us as adults is very important. We have one final question from Francesco Capelletti. We have only 4 minutes to address it, but maybe it can be your last word as well. He says, to achieve optimal digital political activism, it should be necessary to eliminate the injection of false information into the system, fake news. Otherwise, extremist and populism-driven movements could use this factor to create confusion and even influence political outcomes. But nobody wants to limit freedom of expression. So how do we overcome this problem, this dilemma between freedom of expression and populism and fake news? Maurice, I think that you want to come in first.
That's a very tricky question to answer within 4 minutes, but maybe I try to give an idea. So for me, what Joanna talked about was this knowledge to use digital, and especially to maybe also have the knowledge, to see, is it really a fact? Is this website, actually a news website, or is it just, some foreign thing or something? So we have to make sure that people are knowledgeable, so that they are not so easily trapped. We have to secure our political systems, especially against external factors, and we have to ask, okay, when a new campaign is in, and when money is spent there, where this money come from, and ban even like campaigns coming from outside, being very active on that. But on the other hand, you can, disinformation or fake news, sometimes the line is very thin. Is it fake news, or is it just, not your political position? And I think we would make, things worse if we try to censor more things, especially maybe also already with upload filters or automated systems or something like that. So I would be very careful, and in the end say, freedom of speech is a little bit more important than, is sometimes a democratic system has to, just cope that some people are telling lies, but we have to make people, explain to people, make people know the facts and so on, and not try to stop freedom of speech. But it's a really tricky way to deal with it.
Yes, educating more, to be more critical, as Joanna said before, but also you pointed out to education in intolerance, because last year there was a study in the US about polarization, and they asked if a parent would be annoyed if his or her daughter or son would marry someone who voted the other party, and more than 80% said yes. So we see that we live increasingly in more polarized societies. Joanna, would you like to have a last word on that one? No.
I agree 100% with you. So you're right. We need to work in these soft skills and this kind of, as a citizenship, because if not, we will be lost.
Yes, I think that's the perfect summary for this session in one sentence. And we are finishing on time, despite my connection problems. So thank you very much to both speakers for their participation. I think that your insights were very valuable and very much appreciated for our audience. So thank you very much to you both for connecting from Barcelona and from Germany, I guess, Moritz, Brussels, Germany.
From Germany, from Düsseldorf.
Perfect.
Thank you, Laia.
Thanks to you, Laia, also.
Thanks again. Thank you to the participants for connecting. And I will remind them that they will have a 10-minute break now, and they can come back at 12:50 for the final session. So thank you very much, and nice to see you all.
Bye.
Bye, Moritz. Nice to meet you. Bye-bye. Adeu, Laia.
Adeu, Joanna.
sorry for the.
And welcome back to the European Liberal Forum Idea Accelerator 3rd edition. We hope you had a nice break. Welcome to the new participants who just joined us for this session as well. We have now reached the final session of this year's edition, and it's going to be a very interesting fireside chat with Ms. Dida Sharanzova, Vice President in the European Parliament. And they're gonna be looking at regulating big tech. Is the European internet the best way forward? And I'm not gonna spoil anything for you. I'm gonna leave our distinguished speaker and the moderator to deal with that. And I have the great pleasure of introducing the moderator of this fourth session, Mr. Jan Makacek. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Institute for Politics and Society, one of the member organizations of ELF from the Czech Republic. Jan, please, you have the floor. Jan, I think your microphone is muted.
Yeah. Sorry, I was asked to unmute myself. So, yeah. So thanks for the floor, and I would like to welcome again all the participants, and above all my friend Dita Charanzova, who is the Vice Chairman of the European Parliament. And we have 30 minutes for this panel, so we'll just briefly repeat a few important things from the invitation. It is EU aims to create its own standards for the online space and punish global players if they don't meet the European criteria. In other words, the EU calls for a truly European internet as far as the rules are concerned. And the question is the creation of the European internet the right way forward concerning the new challenges? Is it this right time to create a common framework for European-US regulation of big tech and the internet in general? How do society and democratic processes change with the growth of the internet and social networks? What will the future relationship between public institutions and the internet giants look if they often pursue different interests, etc.? So there are many other questions. I myself wrote down many specific questions, and there will be questions from the audience. But I will start with this first question, which is connected with the opening, and the question is, what are the reasons to pursue European regulations, especially in these times when there is like a lot of, especially in rhetoric, a lot of people are speaking that there is a new friendly chapter with EU-US relationship, and perhaps there might be a chance to regulate these big tech companies through some Atlantic coordination, especially with regard to the fact that most of these companies are actually American companies. So could you, Dita, explain the reasons why should Europe go its own way?
Thank you very much, Honza, and also warm welcome to all participants at this forum. Well, you have mentioned a number of questions, so I think we can spend the whole afternoon, maybe evening, discussing these issues. But the key question which you asked me to respond was, why are we doing it? I mean, it's crystal clear that already now we have European rules, e-commerce rules, and we adopted them 20 years ago. And imagine, we all know what happened over the last 20 years. And I would not even mention what happened during the last year when it comes to digitalization, e-commerce in Europe and everything. Where I think if there is something positive about the pandemic, that's really the growth of in the digital field. So we need to fix the problems that we have seen over these last 20 years, where we see a lot of big players, and as we say, with the great power comes greater responsibility. We also see different shortcomings when it comes to what we see in the offline world and in the online world. So it must be crystal clear that if something is illegal in offline, it must be illegal also online, and that we have appropriate tools how to quickly react to illegal goods, content online. So that's the reasons behind. As I said, and we all notice it, the internet has changed dramatically over the 20 years. Only now, if you see the figures that you have 500,000 apps per minute downloaded, that you have 3 million Google search per minute. So we are all our world and our life is now basically online. So this is the opportunity for us to fix the different shortcomings that we see and fix the real problems. Whether the way forward is the European internet, as you asked, I don't think so. And I fear that further, what I would say, even balkanization of internet would just create obstacles for the consumers, but also overall for our society. What we see now in Europe is clearly that we have access to almost all information, which is not censored, which is not controlled. And I wish that this continues even after the adoption of this new legislation. You are right that we have now with the new US administration kind of a new window of opportunity how to discuss these issues together. I'm a big supporter of it, and I'm really vocal in this regard also in the European Parliament, because I think that if you see the European and the US approach to internet, I don't see so many differences. And I see also on the other side of the Atlantic that the issues that we are discussing in Europe are the same that are being discussed in the US. So I think it's really the time where we should sit together and try to fix these problems together, to have our common understanding, to set up the rules together. Because if there is any competitor, it's not, it's China. So I think that we need, if we manage to have common rules between the EU and the US, we will be even stronger on the global scale. So there, I fully agree with you. So these are perhaps my introductory remarks to your questions.
Okay, thank you. And just a brief, short question. Like, what do you think about the fact that it appears that EU is sort of a global leader in regulations and rules, and US is where all these companies start and where all the money is and where all the new ideas are created? Shouldn't Europe be trying more, or European Union try to do more to encourage its own companies to be more active, and because it doesn't seem sustainable that only Americans, with few exceptions like Czech Seznam, by the way, are creating the companies, which are not always positive in all respects, by the way, but Europe is very good in regulating, but it doesn't have many its own companies of its own. What's your opinion on it?
You are right, and we both come from the Czech Republic, and I'm always very proud of the Czech companies in the digital field because they are one of the most successful in the European Union. And when I was in the US and I spoke with a number of successful companies there, they all, not all, but a lot of them actually started in Europe. They left Europe and they argue that it's much easier to start the business in the US. And there we have a problem. But I would argue the problem is that we don't have a real, what I would call, digital single market. So yes, you have successful national companies, but then they don't scale up in Europe. They stay very often in the national field. And if they want to target Europe, so they leave the country, they go to US, and then they come to Europe. I think the way forward is maybe also through these new legislative tools that we are currently discussing, which is the Digital Services Act and Digital Market Act. Because what we want to do is to lay out rules for the companies and also open the space for the European companies to have a share in this global scale. So for me, the way forward, I know that sometimes if you say EU is regulating, not a lot of companies like to hear it. But for me, if we get it right, if we really strike the right balance, that's what we are trying to do. The aim should be to really have clear rules for the companies and facilitate their business in Europe. So I hope that was also the involvement of European companies. And as you know, I'm one of the rapporteur on the Digital Services Act in the European Parliament. I've been in contact with many European companies that are trying to fix also the legislation so it could really benefit the European companies.
Thank you. So we have a question from the Union of Publishers. They have been very responsibly active, sending emails, SMS, and through Facebook already yesterday and again today. So we have to ask this question. And you know what this question is going to be about. It's about digital media platforms respecting or not respecting the rights of publishers of periodic printing in Europe, copyrights in a single digital platform. So far, digital platforms seem to be trying to avoid publisher content payments and abuse their dominant market position. For example, they are requiring free licenses to use content or threatening to block publishing content from platforms they run. At the same time, they take European users of their digital services hostage. So this is a very main lobbying clash, as you are very well aware of. So could you explain us your position and your opinion on this?
Well, I do remember the heated debate we had on the copyright directive reform during the last legislation. It was one of the most sensitive, the most heated debate I experienced in the European Parliament. And we managed to adopt this new kind of rules, the new law on copyrights, where we really try to find this balance, the balance that the publishers were asking, and I do understand a lot of their concerns. And hopefully now we are in the stage where we will see, and I hope very soon, the implementation of this law. So we have a law which was adopted, and now we are in the process to see how it will actually be implemented in member states. For the moment, I follow very closely the discussion in France, but also we will have a very soon discussion in the Czech Republic. So now we have to really wait for the implementation. I know that there are some that argue that based also on what happened in Australia, we should perhaps address these issues in this new legislation, especially in the Digital Market Act. I would be very cautious because I would prefer really to see, first of all, how we implement these new rules, whether they fit the purpose, whether they meet the objective. And if it's not the case, if there are still problems, so then we will come back to it. But I don't think that these two big digital files, Digital Services Act, Digital Market Act, can actually address all the issues that we have. So my response in a nutshell is, yes, I understand the concerns. Let's get it right now while implementing the copyright reform in the European Union. And if the practice shows that it doesn't work, if there are still problems, so let's come back to it. We have a possibility, there is a review in this legislation on copyrights, so there is a possibility to come back to this issue very soon. But I would not address it in the Digital Market Act as some starts advocating for.
Okay, so we will stay with this like for a sec. So it is. It could be explained like this: like there's one side is lobbying, and it's argumenting with the fact that EU is lagging behind also in artificial intelligence and big data processing, etc. So all these companies who are involved in this are saying, if you pay for the content and splinter the internet, and so that would EU would lag behind even more with artificial intelligence and everything. And the publishers, obviously, their interest is that people properly pay for the content which they produce, and they are not interested in some pan-European interest about big data collection. So, so this is this is how I understand it, to put it simply. Like, what are the interests which are clashing? Am I right in this respect?
Well, I would say that it's not only a problem in Europe. As I said, there were recent examples of really tough negotiations between the publishers and the big platforms in Australia. So I think these problems are not unique in a way, only in the European Union. And as I said, I understand that publishers feel that they should be remunerated for the content they created. So that's why we fix it. We fix it, that there are new rules, and I hope that it will be really the push for the big platforms to engage and understand that the rules has changed. So I think this is something which will stay with us for some time. But at the same time, for me, the platforms are not kind of media per se. They are the intermediaries between the publishers and us, users, citizens. So when it comes, for instance, for liability questions, there is a big difference between the intermediaries and the publishers themselves. So it's not a new problem. It's a problem that I think we somehow fixed. Now, as I said, we need to see how it works in practice, how successful the publishers are in the negotiations with the big platforms. And if we still see problems, then we will look at it again. But for the moment, for me, and as I said, we spent more than 2 years discussing where to find the right balance. You have always the question of how the internet is organized in Europe today. As I said, it's a free internet, uncontrolled internet without censorship. And I don't want to end up with all the good intention that we would have European internet with filters that will automatically filter what I see or what I don't see on internet in Europe.
Okay, thank you. So you already responded the next question which I prepared, but anyway, I would specify a little bit more. So do you think that it's a sustainable model that these intermediary, these companies should not be treated as as publishers? Because there has been a discussion about it, obviously, and even politically initiated in the US, and it almost happened. Former US administration was trying to push through the legislation which would take away this exception. And especially with moderating the contents, this is the way they call it. Other people call it censorship, which is more frequent and more common, that they are deleting accounts, deleting statuses, tweets, etc., controlling the content more and more. So they are actually becoming publishers. If they are only intermediaries, they wouldn't control the content, right? Like, so is it sustainable that there are these like ethical committees of some people like who in combination with like artificial intelligence are trying to find dangerous content, and we would have never-ending discussions about what is dangerous and what is not dangerous, for instance, with COVID, etc. So is it sustainable that these companies will not become publishers even in the future?
Well, for the moment, I do see the difference between publishers and social media. For me, social media today are not publishers. And in my way, they should not be also treated in such a way, because then you make the platforms liable for the content, for every content that they have. And the only way for them to be liable for the content will be to really have automated filters that will monitor the content. And for me, it's also the pathway, as I said, to censorship. So if there is a problem, if the platform knows that there is a illegal content, they have to act. This is their duty. But at the same time, me as a user, if I have a doubt about the action of the platform, I should have kind of an appeal mechanism, the way how I will appeal if I'm not happy with the fact that my content was removed from the platform. So, and that's what we are trying actually, that's exactly these problems that we are addressing in this new legislation, that we would have better understanding, better terms of conditions, both for the platforms, but also for us, for users. So I know which kind of conditions I have to respect, and if there is a problem and I feel that my rights were not respected, so I can appeal. You are right that what we see with Facebook is kind of new system, that you have the platform that acts, and then they have independent Facebook court that then analyzes the decision and can actually overrule the decision. I don't know what is the best way forward. We will have a discussion in this respect. What we have now as one of the proposal is to have actually some out-of-court mechanism, appeal mechanism, so where you could, appeal your rights. So these are very tricky questions which we will be discussing in this new legislation. So, but as I said, to simple answer to your questions.
Okay. So something is it has frozen a little bit. There is some technical.
Media are not,
okay,
are
now
not publishing.
Okay, it was interrupted at the very end. So in this respect, I have a completely different opinion, but it's not an interview with me. So it's an interview with you. So the next question is, like, in the US, there is also possibly in the pipeline some legislation which big tech companies are trying to avoid, which would treat them similarly like it US more than 100 years ago treated steel companies and railroad companies and all these monopolies. So these companies like Facebook, Google, etc., are under enormous pressure to be, from reasons of competition and guaranteeing competition and free market, to be splitted into many small companies. So is Europe also considering anything like this, or is it only US only discussion once again?
No, and I would even say that we have already in Europe these tools in the competition policy and this new proposal on the Digital Market Act, which is basically the rules, ex ante rules that we want to create as one of the ultimate resort is the possibility when if the players don't comply, that it could lead what we call structure remedies. So which is in another way to say to breaking up the company. So indeed, we have the same discussion in the European Union. But here, perhaps slight difference that I feel, because what we are talking about are the US companies. So basically, we are targeting the big tech, and all of them come from the US. And so we come back to your first question, that I would rather prefer that we have a common understanding with the US how to deal with these big players, rather than the European Union itself starting there, which could be interpreted by some on the other side of the Atlantic as a digital war. So I think, since the discussion is ongoing on the both sides of the Atlantic, that it's the topic where we should really sit down together and see what we do with these big players. And the same goes about the taxation, the digital tax, which is also another point which is heavily discussed both at the national level, but also at the European level, and at the same time in the US. And here again, with the new administration, with President Biden saying that they are ready to look at the taxation of the not only big tech, but very big companies in general. So there are taxed where the revenue is created. So this is yet another possibility where we should work with the US and try to find common ground and avoiding some tension in our relations.
But it also has to do with OECD, right? Like OECD was supposed to be this platform where the taxation issues about big techs are to be like to reach a compromise. It was supposed to be a platform of OECD. Or is it still in play, or?
Definitely, the discussion is ongoing, but we were stuck with the US not be willing to contributing to this debate. And so that's why I said that I'm happy to see that the position has changed and they are forthcoming and ready to discuss these issues. So that's why I said that I would now rather prefer, or wait with European unique solution and have the broader as possible solution. So OECD context would be really the ideal one. So hopefully by the end of the summer we will see some also tangible results coming from the discussion in the OECD.
Okay, thank you very much. You were right. It's a very interesting topic. We could continue for hours and hours. It would be interesting to do a very long podcast about this, for instance, but we have to unfortunately close it because our time was only 30 minutes. So I would like to ask now Daniel Kadik, chairman of European Liberal Forum, for his and main organizer of this conference, for his concluding remarks. And on my behalf, thank you again for spending your time with us. So Daniel, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Honza, for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Thank you very much, Dita, for joining us today for this very interesting debate. And Jan, I have to agree with you. We should invite Dita as soon as possible again to go deeper into that topic, because there's a lot of things that we still have to debate. But I think one thing that we can agree on throughout the entire day is that the future is indeed digital. The question is, how will it look like? Will we sit in our chairs and consume Netflix on our, like in WALL-E, while algorithms, AI, and robots organize the world? Or do we own the future? Do we set the right parameters to do that? And today, we look at 4 different dimensions of our digital future. We looked at AI, on robots on trial. What happens indeed if robots and AI are in charge? Who is liable in the end of the day? What is the responsibility of society when using AI and robots? We talked about citizen-driven e-democracy, how to make democracy with e-tools better for all of us, more accessible, more inclusive. We talked about unsocial media, and also what social media does with us and our political and societal discourse. And last but not least, the last debate about regulating big tech, regulating technology, and also how do we deal with our competitors all around the world. And Dita, you mentioned it, indeed, China is a very big question. And it's not only a question when we talk about technology, not only a question when we talk about businesses, but it's also a question how we deal with our digital democracy. So we discussed the challenges and opportunities that the digital disruption has brought with it, especially pushed by the current pandemic. And we have seen that we have a massively increased tech dependency. It became clear how much we are dependent, but also how far we have come in the last years, especially in the first intervention. We have seen that starting from the iPhone introduced in 2007 to now, there is a massive shift in what we can do, what we expect to happen, and how these incremental changes on steroids have changed our thinking and our behavior. But the question remains, is reacting enough? How do we create a smarter framework? How do we create smarter policies around us? And this is especially true for AI. The beauty of the free market is that it's completely unpredictable, but it's also the problem with it. So how do we deal with something, a society that doesn't evolve linear anymore, where there are a lot of branches developing? One thing that was mentioned by Moritz Körner is education of skills. So to not only have users, but people who actually are able to create, to understand technology. And this is also part of the digital sovereignty. It's not only about having companies and making our own rules. No, it's also having users who understand what they're doing. We have been talking about the importance of technology neutrality. Why it's important that we don't say this is the way to go forward and only this. We have been talking about the value of data. But there's always the question about how to square the circle between data protection and the necessity of data sharing, especially with the new tools involved. We need to be innovation friendly, but we also need to ensure fundamental rights, as we have seen in discussion about AI on trial. But it's not only about data when we talk about that. It's also about attention, which is the second currency and the second thing that we should be wary about. The speed of connection also means the speed of information has increases, and therefore also how news spreads. This has massive implications on the debates in society, but also in politics. We live in an age of rampant Instagramification of politics and society. Only pictures counts, not context. So our vigilance should not drive our focus away from the opportunities that we have here, especially in the democracy. We need to be vigilant on the one hand that we are not overtaken by pessimism, by people who are hogging our attention, but we should not lose our focus, the opportunities that we have. Not only do we have means of talking about politics, but being informed. More and more direct democracy is possible. More and more service can be directly rendered to the citizens. Technology and digitalization is closing a gap in access to information and participation. This is why civil society can use data and AI to scrutinize the powerful and send out information without any censorship to find out where things are wrong. And at the same time, companies are more and more getting in realms of the states, providing services better and faster than states ever could. But we need to complete the digital single market for European companies and European consumers to have an international connected economic environment. It is also about regulating things in all of this. Countries like Estonia especially give us an idea how personal data and data security can be handled. Not only with the digital ID, but also if you look at things like the digital patient file. Policies here need to be able to keep up with the speed of innovation. Right now, we're massively lagging behind. We haven't even completed the digital single market. We still do not know how to deal with Uber in a lot of countries. Well, this is yesterday's news. Technology is supposed to make our life easier. Technology and access to digital technology has been a great equalizer across borders, countries, social group, gender. But because we know so much more, we also add complexity to an ever faster spinning world. And this is creating backlash. The great European liberal philosopher and politician, Lord Ralph Dahrendorf, examined this almost 25 years ago. In 1997, he examined globalization and its social consequences. On the one hand, he sees new chances and hopes for millions, the unifying power from trade and exchange. But he also predicts the rise of a new regionalism that seeks to retreat into ever more closed environments, out of fear of an increasingly complex global economic world. A mass retreat that seeks salvation in nation states, regions, or religious communities. To battle this, we need public debate, says Dahrendorf. Conflict is a basic fact of social life, just as conflict may be even an essential part of life itself. The European Liberal Forum wants to bring people together to exchange ideas and debate opinions, as this friction is fueling the flame of enlightenment. We are working for a liberal future in a united Europe because we believe that the world is getting better. The world is getting not worse, it's just getting more complex. And in order to work on this complexity, we have to talk to each other and we need to find a way together. With this, I would like to close today's Idea Accelerator. I would like to thank you very much for keeping with us all the time, thanking our partners, our members for the great initiatives, our speakers for the great inputs, for the challenging words that we heard today. And if you're interested in what the future brings, I would like to recommend you our new series that is very soon being launched. It's called Science, Not Fiction, where in a series of events we'll be talking about digital innovation, hardware, but also biotechnology and medicine to see how Europe can be more competitive, to see how we can own the future of Europe. Thank you very much and have a very good weekend.